Swearing-in. Swearing-in's good. Let's see. Okay. So I'm in a fashion show on Sunday. Oh, wait a minute. It's a bridal fashion show.
Really?
I'm one of the male.
That'll be fun.
I just came back.
You have to do the walk thing too?
Yeah, we just practiced.
Yeah.
Boy, it's like a whole new world.
Yeah.
I thought you just walk out and you go, no, this is not just walking. I watched the ladies. The ladies are pretty well. Talk about severe. I decided I had to watch Zoolander about 3 times.
Susie's done that a number of times. Yeah, she enjoys it. Yeah, so. Yeah, we can. Nathan's here right now, so we'll see if Stephanie walks in. If not,
Want to leave that open for her?
Yeah.
So somebody sent me that, Dennis.
Right. Yeah. Very cool.
I got to get the lip thing.
Yeah. So is that what you're gonna? Is that the outfit you're gonna wear too?
I don't think so.
Oh.
That's just for Stephanie to slip in. We're putting up a new panel. No problem. I can do that.
Liz, are you ready? Are you ready? Okay. Please be seated. Welcome to the January 22nd meeting of the Capitola City Council. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Tarlin. Wador.
Here.
Bertrand.
Here.
Termini.
Here.
And Mayor Norton.
Here. We're going to rearrange the agenda a little bit. Stephanie's not here yet, and we'll make sure that she is. We have some appointments to do this evening, and first thing this evening. We are going to move item A on the general government agenda to the bottom of the agenda, and that is the 5-year Measure O plan update. And we'll move that to the agenda so we can move the other items up. Would you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Led by Nathan Cross.
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That's cool. Nathan's here.
Liz, are you going to do the presentation for the oath of office? Nathan Cross, could you come forward? We're going to do a presentation and oath of office for standby city council member for Jacques.
That's why we brought the news team here.
Hi, how are you doing?
If you would raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Nathan Cross,
I, Nathan Cross,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear truth, faith, and allegiance,
that I will bear truth, faith, and allegiance,
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California.
that I take this obligation freely,
I take this obligation freely,
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservations
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
and I will well
And faithfully.
and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am to enter.
For the public's information where this came about from is, every council member appoints someone as their backup person in case something happens to them. And this came about from the 1960s when there was a threat of nuclear war, and it stayed with us ever since then. So we may go back in that cycle, I don't know, but that's the reason that we have standby city council members in. John, can we have a report on closed session, please?
Yes, the City Council had 2 items on closed session this evening, neither of which resulted in reportable action. First of all, I gave the Council an update on the Schroeder litigation, which is still technically pending in the Santa Cruz County Superior Court, despite the fact that the Court of Appeal ruled against the plaintiffs in that case. The Council took no reportable action on that. And secondly, the Council heard from the City Manager with respect to the potential acquisition of the parcel of property located at 2091 Wharf Road, and the Council took no reportable action with regard to that matter either, and provided the City Manager with no instructions per se pending the outcome of tonight's discussions concerning the location of the library. That's the report on closed session.
Thank you, John. Are there any additional materials to our packet this evening? Jamie?
There's some additional material that I believe has been distributed and is on your counter, and copies of which are at the back of the room.
Okay, thank you. Additions and deletions to the agenda? None. We are reorganizing again the agenda. We're going to move item 8A, which is appointments to committees, down until Stephanie shows up, and we will also move item 10A, which is the five-year Measure O plan, to the end of the agenda. So we move to the consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda will be enacted in one motion, the form listed below. There will be no separate discussion on any of these items prior to the time the council votes for action unless members of the public, the City Council, request specific items to be discussed for separate review. Items pulled for separate review will be considered following the general government. Is there any member of the public that would like to pull any item that is on our consent agenda? The what?
The comment. Communication from the public on things not on the agenda. You roll past it.
We can open right now. There's no public comment on this. Is there any public presentation or comment from the public on any item that is not on the agenda? Please step forward.
My name's Steve Seliskar. I'm here to request that the City of Capitola seriously needs to move forward in creating an alternate traffic route by bypassing the downtown area before adding any more large projects. Being a major corridor from East Cliff and Live Oak to Park Avenue, which leads to Highway 1 in Cabrillo, which are seriously impacted any day without any snarls in downtown Capitola. Any traffic disruption in the village of Capitola then leads to more problems in SoCal and the Live Oak area. Events such as the recent flood, which you claim is the reason for moving City Hall and the police department, puts this artery, the floods or any other disaster of such, puts the main artery through Capitola at risk as well, especially if the disasters are compounded by a secondary emergency such as a fire, earthquake, or, as we heard not too long ago, a tsunami. And then by adding a large hotel, which would add more traffic to this area, and more people trying to evacuate this area in a disaster. And then the large library basically is going to put a lot of traffic on Wharf Road, which only has 2 accesses basically at that point where the library is at present. And once again, adding to more problems in the Live Oak area or Soquel area. For the library, I would consider putting a overpass over Soquel Creek, which I know it's environmental and all that, but things have gotten put through in different projects and stuff, bypassing or mitigating the environmental impacts. And one which would be of lesser value but still would aid in alleviating the traffic through Capitola would be a parallel traffic lane, actually 2 traffic lanes going over with the trestle here in down Capitola. And it would start at Park Avenue and end at Prospect or East Cliff or Cliff Drive. And on any weekend or any time when traffic is a little bit heavier, one only needs to go up the street here to the corner of Bay and Capitola, not to mention any businesses, because it is doing good business, but whoever does the traffic studies for that intersection with that business needs to take another look at that, because one car can snarl that whole traffic, that whole intersection, with school letting out and people coming off the freeway coming into Capitola and people not paying attention to where they're supposed to turn. Visitors are worse, but the locals aren't that much better, because when I came down here just now, coming down Capitola Avenue, somebody's pulling out of the intersection with their tail stuck in the northbound Capitola Avenue lane, and so nobody can come up or make a turn up Capitola Avenue, so they're basically stuck in the intersection as well. So either signaling has to be put in, that would really alleviate the traffic problem, but a bypass would definitely be necessary, I would think, before any more projects are put in, especially a 80-room hotel, if that's what's being planned, or anything of that size in this area here, because anything down here impacts not just downtown Capitola, it impacts Park Avenue, Soquel, Live Oak, 41st, the freeway, and you all know, you've been through it all, I'm sure. So appreciate your serious consideration to that project.
Thank you for your input on that, Steve. I suggest that we do have a traffic and circulation committee, a village committee, that meets on, I think, a monthly or bi-monthly. If you talk to Steve Jesberg there, he'll give you the next agenda for that. That'd be a good time to give him your input at that time to that committee. So,
well, are you, any of you folks on the RTC or?
I'm the representative for the RTC.
That would be something, you know, could go into that project, that area as well too. So I don't know. But anyway, I'll try and connect with him. And
thanks, Steve. Thanks. Appreciate it. We move back to the consent agenda. Thank you, Stephanie, for joining us here.
Okay. I'll move the consent agenda. Second.
Motion.
I have a question on one item, item C.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
We can go to that.
Let's go right now.
It's just on the check register. On the staff report, it lists a payment to Community Bridges, and it says fiscal year 15-16. Just want some clarification on that.
Councilor, what check number was that?
It's on the staff report, page 1. It just says there's a list of the top checks that exceed $10,000.
Councilmember Bottorff, that should be the payment that we make to Community Bridges as part of our community grant program, and that would be the, I believe that would be the third payment of this current fiscal year, which would be the...
It says fiscal year 15-16. That's what I'm confused about.
Let's see if Tori can shed any light on that.
Yeah.
I believe there just should be a typographical error. It should be 14-15.
Thank you. That was my question.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second on the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, with the exception of the 911 payment, which I'm not voting against. I'm just bringing a point that I disagree with. Okay. Let's go back to appointments to committees. We have Stephanie here, and I know she has a couple appointments we need to take care of.
I'm going to continue mine. I don't have any for tonight. Thanks.
Okay, I'll make mine real quick. I have an appointment to the Finance Committee. I'm going to recommend Nathan Cross as my representative for the Finance Committee. Gail Ortiz is my appointment to the Planning Commission. And speaking to the mic. Oh, I'm sorry. Gail Ortiz is my appointment to the Planning Commission. That has not changed. And then also there is appointment to the Commission on the Environment. And with you, Stephanie, if you're going to are you going to appoint Kristen or not? Or
I have to finish interviewing people, so I'm not ready to make.
Okay, then I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to appoint Kristen Sullivan as my appointment then.
Commission on the Environment.
Yes. Because Jocks now is the City Council representative on that committee. Is there any other discussion of appointments to the City Commissions?
Mr. Mayor, I would also recommend that on the Finance Advisory Committee, there's been a nomination for the business rep by the Chamber of Commerce, as is traditional, and it's incumbent upon the council to confirm the nomination of Sundi Carcello, I apologize if I mangled the name, to that position.
So moved.
Okay, let's make it in motion for all of the appointments then, that we agree to
Oh, I
those.
didn't know we needed a motion for the other appointments, if they stood on their own.
I believe the other appointments do stand on their
Do?
own. This
Okay.
is the one that requires a,
The Chamber of Commerce's appointment.
yes.
Second on that motion.
Yeah, from wine time. Okay. We got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So carries. Okay. We move back to the consent agenda, and in the consent agenda, I'll go back to the public. Is there anyone who would like to pull any item that's on the consent agenda for discussion? Please step forward. Okay. Council,
Consent?
we had consent. I'm sorry. Yes, we've already moved the consent.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. We're going to the general government at this point. And the first item on there, we moved item A to the bottom of the agenda, and we will consider the ad hoc library committee's recommendation to select the current library site as a location for a new and future library site. Jamie?
Morning, Mr. Mayor and council members. As you recall, at your last City Council meeting on January 8th, the City Council accepted the Library Ad Hoc Committee's recommendation to site a future library at the current property and postponed a site selection by the City Council until this evening's meeting. As you recall, the Library Committee focused on city-owned sites when they reviewed potential locations for a future library, principally because it would eliminate any need for site acquisition and the costs associated with that. As part of their deliberations, we did do some public polling over the past year. Some of the results indicated that the most important factors to Capitola residents for library location were really accessibility-based. The provision of free parking, ability to reach the site by a bicycle or by walking, and then proximity to schools and near the center of town. So the two sites that the Library Committee did discuss was the current site. Some of the pros that they identified was it was close to multifamily housing. It has easy access to central SoCal. It's convenient because of its location near retail, and for folks running errands, they could stop there on their way. And it was also near the center of town. Some of the downsides of that current site that were identified was that we might need additional land if we build a 12 to 13,000 square foot library. And there would be temporary impacts, of course, during construction of a new library to the library operations. And then parking for the future Richmond project, should it come, could be impacted by this proposal. The other site that they looked at was the property we sit on today, the current City Hall property, approximately 7 acres. Some of the pros were identified by the committee were that it was near the new Brighton Middle School. Again, we wouldn't need to acquire any land to site a library here. It's near the center of town. Also has good access, as well as leveraging other city goals to get our first responders out of the flood zone, parking structure, and economic development. Some of the downsides were identified that there would be summer parking challenges and traffic congestion. It would be a complicated, large-scale project to be involved with a larger civic center proposal. And former RDA funds are limited to interior finishes and furnishing and couldn't be used for construction of the library. Based on that, the Library Committee, as you recall, did recommend that you choose the current site as the site for a future library. Staff simply recommends that you do select a site and direct us to focus our planning efforts at that site. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Comments from council?
I stand by my comments from the last meeting. I understand why we moved it over to this meeting because we didn't have a full council. I believe that the ad hoc committee has looked at this for a long time, and we feel that the current site, in spite of the land acquisition challenges, is the place to put our library. So I will move that.
Second. And just under my...
I'm going to go through a public hearing process
Yeah, we're going
first.
to have a public hearing, yeah.
Okay. Is there a representative from the ad hoc library committee that would like to speak to us first?
I see several.
Good evening, Mayor and council members.
Thank you, Susan.
I am a member of the Library Ad Hoc Committee that the council appointed, and I just wanted to encourage you to follow the Ad Hoc Committee's recommendation to place our future library where the existing library is located now on Wharf Road. This was a unanimous decision by our group. There was not one person who wanted the alternate location. The city is under some time constraints for building a new library. I think we have to start construction by June of 2018. So I think it's important for you to make a decision about where the site is going to be so we can get started on the necessary steps to complete this process. I also wanted to mention there was an article in the paper about what was happening tonight, and it indicated that a decision had been made for a 12,000 square foot library. And at this point in time, the Library Ad Hoc Committee has not made a decision about size or funding. Our goal is to come up with a location, and then once we have the location, we will engage the community in a process to decide what size the facility should be and what we could fit onto that site. So thank you, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them.
Thank you, Susan. No questions this time. Thank you. This is a public hearing. Anyone would like to address the council on this? I appreciate that comments be limited to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Barbara Gorson, and I'm a member of the Ad Hoc Committee. And I would like to reiterate that the Ad Hoc Committee did unanimously recommend the current site. And I feel that, personally anyway, with that kind of recommendation, if the council decides to go otherwise, it's really demotivating for citizens who want to serve on committees. I know the committee is not making the decision, but that's just my personal feeling on the whole thing. And I also believe that there's strong sentiment in the community for the current location. I have not talked to anybody who is not already assuming that it's at that current location and likes it there. It's got convenient access, which is proven by the fact that that library, that tiny little library, has way more use than anyone would ever expect a library of that size. It has good parking and free parking, which our community in a recent poll has said was critical for a library location. And I don't see that the Civic Center location could possibly provide as much free parking. In addition, I think that it would not be wise to tie our library's future to a project that is so complex and not as timely, perhaps, in being built and constructed as we need for our library. I wouldn't want to encumber the success of getting our new library branch with that project. I think that there is way more traffic congestion in that area, anywhere close to the village. People tend to go to the library when they're out doing other errands, and I don't see anyone going to 41st Street, combining that with a visit to the area that the Civic Center project is proposed during summer, during the weekends, or during commute hours. I certainly don't drive near the village during those hours. And parking. There's just, I don't think parking could be adequate there. And so that's really all I have to say. So I'm hoping you'll support the current location.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Nelson Westman. I would just like to make one quick comment. I think the Wilford location is a perfect location for a new library, and really excited in the possibility that the city will approve this location so that we can move it over to the library. The one thing that I didn't know broken out completely in the codes for putting it in Pacific Cove, the new city center, is that 2/3, I think, of the customers in the Capitola Library actually are from outside of Capitola. And I think it's a safe assumption to make that most of them arrive by automobile. I think it is very inadvisable to add hundreds of road trips a day to the already congested village area by having all of those out of the city. Patrons of the library have to make their way into the village, through village traffic, and find parking in and around the center of the village. So, once again, we look forward to the choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Nelson.
Good evening, council members. My name is Amy Forrest. I live on Oak Drive. I've been watching this library debate for a long time. I really believe that the site that the library sits on currently is the best site for it. I agree with what people have been saying. There is a walkability there. There's a lot of local neighborhoods. And it is used better served for Soquel and everyone who's using the library, and also as a stopping point on the way for errands, so that people may possibly use their cars less. Down in the village, there are so many times when it's just too congested, and we want to leave the library a place that's easily accessible. I'd love to see something happen in this area, but it seems like it's better suited for things that will support tourists and bring in money than putting in a public service like the library. So thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Is there any other member of the public who would like to speak on this issue? We move it back to council, and we have a motion on the floor for approval in a second. Is there any other discussion from council?
I have a couple comments.
Yeah.
Yeah, with regards to the library, the most important point I want to make and why this is back here again is based on some incidents that happened last year with this council. I think it's really important for the public and the people that elect people up here that when we have a major item, which the library definitely is a major item, that the entire council be present to make that vote. So that's the main reason it's back here again, and I apologize for having to bring some people out here twice to speak, to make their comments, but we hear everything that you say. And one of the reservations about the library location where it's at is, to this date, we have no actual source of funding to build a library. The county's falling behind on how that's going to be funded. There is a small residual amount of RDA money that's left to build up, but not enough to build anywhere near the square footage that we're talking about. There is some talk about tax measure, but recent tax measures didn't go over well, so I'm a little reluctant to throw my support that way. My last concern is that the size of the lot makes any kind of a building over 10,000 feet a challenge. And I don't know which direction, how that library is going to suit the new types of libraries that are being built. They're becoming more of gathering places than just about books. My important concern here is to build the right library in the right place, and that means it's going to service all the needs that we have. So I have reservations about that site. The existing land that's there may not be enough, and the prospect of additional land is not a guarantee by any means. So I'm reluctant on that site. Just want to make those points.
Thank you, Ed. Dennis? Ed Jackson.
So I want to thank really great comments, and thank you so much for coming out. This is what this committee is about. And I'd like to highlight something that Susan said, and it was something that really means a lot to me. And that's that the ad hoc committee, ad hoc library committee is going to be reaching out to the public. And we're going to do whatever possible to get community involvement. And that is really critical for the success of this project. This is a project we can do. We'll find the funding, but there has to be community support. So thank you very much, committee.
I didn't get a chance to finish looking in the files to see if we had the brochure, but I do remember the brochure that was given to prospective buyers of the Kaufman and Broad homes, and it was to buy your home next to the library, next to the tot lot. So I was remembering that brochure at the last meeting, and you know, I feel really strongly that we should carry out our promises. We should finish what we start. We've been known for doing a good job with our public projects in the past, and I want to continue doing that. So as the people that bought their homes, you know, in the Kaufman and Broad homes, next to the library, next to the tot lot, I think we should honor them, honor that. I think it works well where it is. The location's great. I was over there this afternoon. I talked to the librarians and the staff members and the volunteers. And they love it there. They love it there, and they are so thrilled that it is so successful, that it is so widely used by such a diverse number of people from just not Capitola, as we've learned. It's really well used by people in Live Oak and Soquel. So where it is, it's great. It's great. Doesn't get mixed up with any other event activities or village activities, and so I think it's terrific.
Thank you, Stephanie. This isn't the first time we've approved the library in that space. Obviously, the library's there because it was approval of the community and the city council at the time. I think Stephanie and I sat on the council when that was approved originally, 98 maybe, somewhere in that time. So this process has proven itself twice that this is the best location for this library, and we have a motion on the floor of a first approval and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Member Carlin?
Here. Aye.
Odor?
No.
Bertrand?
Yes.
Termini?
Yes.
And Mayor Norton?
Aye. Thank you. Item is approved. Make a comment on the library? It's over, the library's over. Okay, we move to item 10C, consider initiative of a public process to evaluate options to develop a new public park, a parking structure, a new civic facilities, and a hotel on 420 Capitola Avenue in the Pacific Cove sites. Jamie?
Mr. Mayor, council members, this item before you is an opportunity to consider whether or not to direct staff to initiate a public process, to hold hearings, to review potential plans for this site, to redevelop this site. This is the follow-up to a hearing that we held several months ago, wherein we had a private developer proposal to consider partnering with the city to initiate that process. And at that time, City Council directed staff to reject the offer from the private developer, but to return to Council both with a staff-led public process to look at these options, as well as with all the available information that the city has assembled over the years related to plans for this site. In addition, I also wanted to point out that in 2013, sort of the genesis of all of this went back to when the city built the Lower Pacific Cove parking lot and directed staff to come up with plans to make sure that it was a temporary parking lot and to develop a way in which that parking lot could be converted to open space and the parking could be consolidated into a parking structure. So as background into this, a lot of different policy guidance went into thinking about what a project like this could look like. It included a lot of the general plan goals, talking about developing the parking structure and trying to recreate open space in Lower Pac Cove Park, moving the critical facilities out of the floodplain and supporting overall economic development. As staff developed and looked at this project, 4 primary goals really came to the forefront. The first was creating open park space in Lower Pacific Cove, relocating the emergency responders out of the floodplain, building a multi-story parking structure to consolidate the surface parking, and then limiting the overall impact to the general fund. The site location is a 7-acre site, as you're well aware, with frontage on both Capitola Avenue as well as the Monterey Bay side of the property. The site, as we all know, in 2011 was inundated when the pipe in Noble Gulch burst. It also is in the floodplain for both Noble Gulch as well as Soquel Creek. The challenge behind all of this, because these are some pretty interesting ideas, and obviously the money is really of paramount importance, particularly for me as your city manager, are cost estimates that we've prepared for parking structures, put the cost of the structure in somewhere around the $13 million range. In addition, looking at civic facility, probably something in around the $8 million range to build. The debt service, if we were to solely debt finance a parking structure, that would require about $750,000 a year. The debt service to just borrow for a civic facility would be in the $450,000 to $550,000 a year. So the total amount, if we were to just purely debt finance that, would put us at the $1.2, $1.3 million a year payment range, which ends up being a figure that's around 9% of the total general fund, which frankly, my recommendation would be that that would be too high a debt load for the city to support and would come at the expense of too many existing city services. So instead what we've done is tried to look for a way in which a project like this could potentially self-finance to some degree. So looking at an air photo of the overall site, the concepts, as we've discussed them in the past, include relocating the administrative offices and the police station over to the other side of the property, out of the floodplain, developing the parking structure in the middle of the lot on the higher property and sinking it 1 level below grade, developing the open space in the Lower Pacific Cove parking lot area, and then the financing for this would come from a new hotel, approximately 80 rooms on the site where we're sitting today. This is what it would look like with all the pieces together. Now, looking at it conceptually, how could a project like this start to self-fund? The primary vehicle behind that would be the hotel tax that would come off of a new 3-star type hotel. Looking at potential comparable type hotels, staff estimates something in the order of $550,000 to $650,000 a year in hotel tax the project could potentially generate. In addition, if the project were to park in a public parking structure, potentially there could be another $100,000 to $200,000 a year in a parking tax. That would allow debt service for approximately $12 to $14 million. That doesn't obviously finance the more than $20 million of the entire project cost, but it takes a big piece out of it. In addition, there could be other revenue associated with the project, the sale, lease of the existing land that we're sitting on, one-time parking fees. And in addition, I think that some of the project could be grant-funded eligible, whether it's EDA, Economic Development Administration, the federal government, who has been a big funder for some big Santa Cruz City projects recently, and it's probably Capitola's turn. In addition, CDBG, as part of the job creation components of this project. Those would be, if we were to pursue the project, they would be avenues that I would recommend pursuing. In addition, at the last meeting, Council asked staff to bring forward all the available information that we had for the site. The first thing is the 2011 parking structure design by Watry Engineering, which recommended a 3-story option 1 with 554 stalls at a cost of $12.8 million. One of the things that staff is suggesting this evening is that we could take a hard look at this, because when this parking structure was developed, there was constraints both to the north and south of the parking structure, which limited the width of the potential parking structure. Those constraints have eased to some degree with the RTC's acquisition of the rail line adjacent here and the closure of the Pacific Cove Mobile Home Park. So what that means is the parking structure potentially could be widened out by a few feet, which would allow that these aisles that you'll see that are angled to become squared off. And squared off parking structures are much more efficient in the cost per space. So we do suggest that if we proceed with the project, we want to take at least a look and how many more spaces we could get within the existing three-story plan by simply squaring off the parking structure. In addition, in 2012, staff worked with DevCon, who's a large developer here in Northern California, in exploring this idea, and DevCon offered up an architect to work pro bono to develop some plans, and then they costed out those plans, and they costed the plans out for a joint City Hall library project on the property, on the other side of this property at $13.2 million. Obviously, with your decision this evening, the library component of the project is no longer a piece of that, and so the whole top floor of the project would need to be rethought. Those plans are included in the packet this evening, and here you can see essentially what they proposed was a two-story structure with one story at grade facing Monterey Bay Avenue with a library on it, and then a city council hearing chamber, and then a second lower floor with the police and the administration below that looking over the park. The third piece of information that's included in your packet was developed by Group 4 Architecture. That was a consultant to the library JPA when they were developing their library master plan, and they took a look at all 10 library facilities in the county and tried to figure out what needs those facilities would have over the coming years. Since our facility obviously is in dire need of a complete rebuild, it's currently located in portables, what they did was they sketched up two different alternatives for rebuilt libraries, both on the current site as well as this site here behind us. And so this was the plans that they prepared, showing again sort of a different concept for a joint use facility with both a library, police, and administration. But rather than going 2 stories with one below grade, they had a 2-story with 2 above grade on the intersection. And this again was developed by Group 4. And I want to reiterate that outside of the Watry study, none of these other design efforts were funded by the city. They were either done pro bono or they were done by the library JPA. So those are the different pieces of information that we've developed over the years looking at this site. What we are asking this evening is whether or not the council wants to initiate a public process to take a look at this sort of project, really consistent with the general plan goals, looking at a project that would free up Lower Pack Cove for open space and recreation, look at relocating the first responders, developing the parking structure, and trying to facilitate economic development. What you'll see this evening proposed is a relatively focused public process. The intent behind it, I think, is really to try to get the feedback about whether this is something the city wants to explore or not, rather than engaging in a sort of open-ended, longer-term public process that takes up a huge amount of staff time or potentially city expense. And I think, while there's obviously a concept that I think we want to get input on, I think there are other options that could be considered, whether there's a scaled-back version of the project or some modification, or other way to achieve some of these goals that could come out of that process and certainly would be welcomed. And then the goal would be to present the outcomes of that process in early spring. And I want to reiterate that that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the final time to make a decision, but it would be to check back in with council to see whether or not we want to continue pursuing the project. And frankly, at that point would be when I would expect we would begin to incur more costs doing some of the technical studies associated with really refining the project. So what we're proposing this evening is allocating $25,000 to this effort. That would come from $10,000 of unanticipated events in the city manager budget, as well as $15,000 of fund balance. That would give a total project budget of $25,000, and we would really be relying heavily on the city's on-call architect, Anderson Brule, who has extensive experience with both libraries and city hall type projects and helping with public processes. This would be a staff-led process, but I do think that some of the experience that Anderson Brule could bring would really help staff in preparing relevant material and making sure the time was well spent for the community as well as staff. And obviously, we can change the scope and duration of the public process at the council's desire, but that does affect the costs and obviously affects staff workload. So the overall thought was that if we were to proceed, we would be updating some of our parking structure numbers and preparing for our workshops through February, hosting 2 workshops in March, refining concept plans that were developed during those processes, developing more refined in-house cost estimates, funding plans, and then coming back in May for council direction on the overall project. And at that point, the decision could be to proceed further into the project or discontinue work. So with that, I'm available for questions.
Question of staff. Can I ask Rudy to come up for a minute, if you would? I do. Rudy, as first responders, what's your reaction to the movement of a police department out from its present location?
Well, I think we're exposed to several natural disaster opportunities, and it seems as though they're increasingly approaching, especially with sea level rise and those other opportunities, and depending on the rain situation, how that might happen. There's always that risk. It almost seems as a question not if, but when. And it does impact city services when the next event does occur. The reason for that is then we're looking at moving, not only trying to provide public safety services to the rest of the community, whether it's evacuating the village or responding to fire threats or other earthquake threats around the community as they're happening, but then trying to at least secure the facility that we're challenged with hopefully keeping.
Okay, thank you, Rudy. I appreciate that. Jamie, has the city looked at any alternative sites for the moving of the police department and city hall? And what are those sites if there have been?
So we certainly have looked at other sites. One of the challenges becomes not only then do you have to pay for the construction of a new facility, but you also have to pay for the land. And unfortunately, land costs are significant in our community. Obviously, the city does own other pieces of property. The McGregor property is one piece of property, although I don't think it's been seriously considered for this type of facility due to its location on the periphery of town. We obviously own property in the industrial area where our corporation yard has been. Again, that site probably not conducive for a location for City Hall or the police department. There are certainly some more centralized locations in town which have relatively low levels of development on them today. However, the land costs on them really do affect the overall project costs.
Thank you.
I have two questions. First, in terms of staff. So we're moving ahead at the library. So that's going to take a considerable amount of time from your staff to push that project and work with the ad hoc committee. The other is to potentially move ahead on this, depending on how we vote tonight. So do you feel that those are two projects that can be accomplished with the proper amount of effort for success?
As we have it proposed, yes. I think this is a relatively focused effort that we're proposed this evening to take a look at this, and this is something that we can do. I think that in the longer term, if this project does become something that's a city priority and that we're going to work on more heavily, we are going to have to think about how exactly that's done and whether it's done through a public-private partnership where we're leveraging other people's money effectively to help design and finalize the project, or we're investing our own money in some sort of project manager or something. But I think to get to the next decision point, we're okay. I do think for both of those projects, there's going to come a point where we will need to look critically at bringing on resources to make sure we get it done on time, on budget, the best possible way for our community.
So that will increase the cost?
They will. I mean, at the end of the day, building something like this is something we don't do every day as a city. And so I think regardless of how you think about the project, at some point we're going to bring on an outside technical expert to help get the project done. And so I wouldn't say it increases the cost, but it's a part of the overall project cost that needs to be incorporated.
Okay. My second point, Ed sort of alluded to, and that is the cost for the overall project. So we're still not certain how we're going to pay for the library. I feel the community support, and I see the community support for a library. We'll be able to figure that one out. I don't see the community support for the turnaround at City Hall. Okay. In campaign, that was one of the things that just kept coming up repeatedly. Why are we not thinking about this? I think there's some good reasons to think about it, but I don't think we're ready to do it right now. So my question is, how are we going to pay for both? If we go ahead with both projects and we feel staff could do it, and it's already certain that it's going to be difficult to pay for the library, how are we going to pay for both at the same time?
Well, as I discussed during the presentation, I think the basic model for this project is it's got to self-fund. I think former Mayor Story said it at the last hearing is if it's not this, then, are we going to pay for these types of improvements with a tax? And I can't see that as a viable option, a tax passing to pay for a parking structure in a new civic center. So I think if we're going to develop a project, it's got to basically self-fund. That is, it's got to fund through grants, it's got to fund through TOT that it generates itself. Now, the question becomes is that cost? Is the cost associated with, the hotel, which is the primary funding driver here, is that too great for the policy goals that we achieve? And that's a real core policy question. Is that cost, that hotel, too great a cost to get our emergency responders out of the floodplain, reclaim Lower Pack Cove, and getting a parking structure done? And that's fundamentally I think the question, because I do think that the project can self-generate the funding if we can make the determination that that price is worth paying.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Any other questions, staff? This is a public hearing. Please step forward if you have some discussion on this item. I request that you restrict your comments to 3 minutes, and those who are waiting, please line up at the edge of the room here so we can go through this as efficiently as possible. Thank you.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to lead off tonight. My blood pressure is just starting to come back to normal now after I sat there and watched Jamie's numbers on the screen. $8 million to build a new city hall, city council chambers, police department, adequate police, secure parking, all of the things that go into our current police department today for $8 million. It just, for comparison purposes, the city spent over $1 million to build a temporary gravel parking lot. And thank you so much for doing that, but it defies credibility that $8 million is going to pay for a brand new state-of-the-art city hall. But I know that vetting out all these numbers would be a logical part of any sort of outreach or public interaction process, so I'm not going to dwell on that tonight. So, for the record, as you can tell, I am strongly opposed to a $30 to $40 million city hall complex in Pacific Cove and the associated sale and development of an 80-room hotel on the current city hall site. For me, the best case scenario tonight would be for the council to give a thumbs down on proceeding with this project to halt the continued drain on staff time trying to keep this ill-conceived dream alive. But more realistically, I am guessing what is likely to happen tonight is the council will proceed with some sort of outreach program to belatedly start trying to bring the public into the process of considering the largest and most expensive public works project in the history of the city of Capitola. Should that be the case, I am urging the council to ensure that such an outreach program is designed to be as transparent and as successful as possible. And in this case, I define success as a two-way communication process between City Hall and the public. As proposed, the staff's outreach process is wholly inadequate and perpetuates the under-the-radar approach that has surrounded this project from its outset. Such an expanded outreach could actually be useful. It could actually be an opportunity to reintroduce into this discussion some alternatives. Those would include building a parking structure without building a new city hall and without selling off this site to build an 80-room hotel. Another is remodeling the current city hall to raise the PD up out of the floodplain and to give them a little more space. Both of these may well prove to be not only doable at a fraction of the cost, but will have little or no adverse impacts on all of the surrounding neighborhoods. And of course, there is always the ever-popular do nothing. It is time to have a good, informed, two-way community dialogue about this. And did I mention, please, please, do not spend any more taxpayers on consultants until we have gotten much further down the road on this dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Nelson. Good day. Brian Peoples, Aptos. Actually, Aptos Rail Trail. Representing that. I know many of the council members appreciate all the work they do. Been active in the transportation RTC for probably 5 years. And one of the things I really want to point out to Capitola Council is you have the railroad tracks above you. And we're a long process going on, but we're hopeful that we'll have a bike path in there by 2016. Some cost estimates come out in less than a month on the train. The tourist train didn't work. There is no freight. And suggest, and I know Dennis and Michael are on top of the RTC issues and topics, but I encourage the new members to learn about what's going on with the tracks. Now, in concern to the opportunity you all have with this property, I think it's a phenomenal opportunity for you guys. You know, you've got to improve this. A hotel, you know, whatever you decide, absolutely. I used to be an environmental engineer 30 years ago, safety engineer. Absolutely, you take your hazmat stuff out of the floodplain. Upgrade the buildings, improve our community. When we get the bike path rolling into a hotel, phenomenal idea, phenomenal idea. The amount of property this community is going to gain when those tracks become available, you guys, that has to be part of this equation. So maybe you're a little ahead of yourself on hiring your consultant to do some preliminary plannings. Wait a month. Maybe even say, hey, let's hear what happens on the cost assessment on the trail. Now, concerning the cost, we have investors who will contribute, who will help your community. You guys have a property. You're right next to the Silicon Valley. This is a great place. You guys are rich in a great community, great asset where you are. Of course you're going to leverage this property. Of course you're going to go to the private sector and say, give us some RFPs. Give us, you know, hey, give us some ideas. Come to the developers. There's plenty of other developers out there. You know, so I think you guys are doing a great job. I think that you've got a great property here, and I think you absolutely continue to focus on developing it. And remember, let's get those tracks out and get that trail in by 2016. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Good evening, Council. My name is Margaret Kinsler. I own a house right on Soquel Creek in the very first block between the ocean and the railroad trestle. I have watched many floods happen there, but I have never seen the water move. You can't hear me?
Maybe you get the master volume turned up, because
I
everyone in the back keeps on doing the ear motion.
Either that or we move Johnny to the front of the room.
Okay. Well, anyway, my parents bought that house in 1960, so I have a long history of watching the creek and watching the ocean and seeing winter storms, you know, come up the creek. And I have never seen the water move anywhere past the back of my house, ever. So, you know, I really question whether there is any real threat of flooding to the police department. You know, it just seems incredible to me, actually. The other thing is, I think Jacques said it, there is no public support for this civic center. None. And I think you know it. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret.
Well, I'm returning your sign-in sheet, and I filled it out.
Thank you. I hope everybody's signing it.
Good evening again. I'm Susan Westman. I think all of you received a copy of the letter that I sent to the council about the public process that I proposed as an alternative to the one that the city manager put together. It seems to me that what we're talking about is the largest, most expensive project that Capitola has ever considered undertaking. And if you're going to keep pushing this rock up a hill and try and do it, for you to be successful, you're going to have an awful lot of community support. And I agree with Margaret. I don't think there is support out there in the community for this project at this point in time. Personally, I think the best outcome tonight would be for you to say that you don't want to go forward with the city manager's development plan. I agree that there could be numerous ways of financing a parking structure that we could look at, which wouldn't involve the city building an 80-room hotel and a complete new city hall facility, taking up a portion of the lower Pacific Cove, which we originally talked about being as an open space and park. I am in favor of ultimately having a parking structure in Capitola. I think it makes good sense. But if the price that I have to pay to have that parking structure is to have an 80-room hotel and all the expenses that go with relocating City Hall, then that price for the parking structure is too high for me. And I think Capitola is a creative community. If building this parking structure is the top priority and what people want to do, I think we can ultimately come up with a way of financing it that doesn't have such a negative impact on the community itself. So I hope that you will drop this current proposal and perhaps go back and look at some ways of financing the parking structure. That may not happen quickly. As Jacques said, I think our first priority ought to be right now to build a new library in Capitola, get that done, get that accomplished so the people of Capitola can have some pride in what the city has done for them. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stephen Woodside, and I'm a part-time resident of this lovely community. My great-grandfather came here by train and camped in Camp Capitola, and the family hasn't really ever left. And I'm here to say that I think it's very important for you to engage in a serious look and to go forward, at least to reach out to the public and test the waters on some things which I think are important. I think getting your law enforcement and emergency services out of the floodplain is an important thing. Sea level rise is inevitable. And even though Margaret's and my house have come close to flooding, I think we all worry about the fact that another foot or two, maybe a tsunami someday because of an earthquake, or king tides combined with a storm, and we're really in trouble. And that's when you need your emergency services the most. So I think that part of that piece is really a very important piece to take a serious look at. How you get there, how you fund it, I don't have a clue, but that's why you reach out to the public. You get the best ideas of people who live here, have enjoyed this place for years, and I think you're going to find that maybe something will emerge from that process that no one's thought of yet. I don't know the answer. I do think that I remember hearing people complain when this city hall was built. It was too expensive. It wasn't, you know, why did you pick that site, et cetera, et cetera. But it served the community reasonably well. It's accessible to everybody. It seems to work. You got to think ahead, and you can't anticipate all of the future changes that this community will experience. The previous speaker mentioned the Silicon Valley's right over the hill. There's a lot of pressure on this community, like there are pressures elsewhere in the Bay Area in terms of affordability and folks who are not able to afford the homes that they live in right now. Those are all tensions that you have to worry about. So making this community or continuing to keep it livable and accessible, this property is a piece of that. Tourism provides a source of revenue that can help support some of the activities that make this community viable for everybody who lives here. Anyway, I'm rambling a little bit because I think the most important thing is to reach out. You've got a great city manager who's motivated to try to do some creative things. I'd say go. Go with the public outreach. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve.
Good evening. My name is Carol Arau, and I wrote an email to you all this afternoon after reading the Santa Cruz Sentinel article. In October, I read an article. I don't know if it was the same reporter, but that alerted me. And I'm a little alarmed that I have to be alert and be reading the online Sentinel to find out what my city is doing. I'm sorry, I have a lisp. I have a dental implant coming, and I can't talk clearly with the temporary that's in my mouth. If we were rolling in money, if this was a period of good times, this would be a great idea. But where is the money going to come from? I think the city, are you the city manager, is overly optimistic. I know I'm not going to vote for any increases, any tax measures. The last one I voted against. People are still struggling. They don't want to pay more money for something that may be too luxurious for the city at this time. It's just at this moment in time we are still in recovery. It just isn't a good idea. And my 2 cents is in that email. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Good evening, council members. My name is Molly Ording, and I live on Depot Hill. And I also sent you an email about this and wasn't planning to speak, but I really feel that the timing of this proposal is just off. We have some big things going on in Capitola now, the library. I think we all need to really look at this parking area, the new parking area, the gravel lot, the beach 1 or 2 or whatever we're calling it, and see how it seasons, see how it's used. I mean, we've only had 1 season with that parking lot, so I think we really need to have a good second year to look at that lot. And the other part is the skate park, the dog park, the bike park. That's another thing that I think we need to take some time and look at. The one part of this proposal that appeals to me is to have a park in that site. But until we see how this other park that is being built is used and enjoyed and what it lacks or what it doesn't lack, I think the timing on this whole thing is off. It's very premature. My sense is let's do a good job on what we're undertaking now. Let's watch, let's learn, maybe come back and revisit this in a couple of years. And in the meantime, let's have the city do the city's business and let us rest here in Capitola. Save the 80-room hotel proposals. This is now number 3, and it doesn't have a chance in you-know-what of going through as an 80-room hotel proposal. So let's just do a good job on what we've undertaken and maybe revisit this in a couple of years when we have a little more information. Thanks.
Thank you, Molly. Now's your time to give your opinion. Please step forward.
Guess we're out of opinions.
No. Okay, so...
Oh, Nathan. Yeah, standby council member.
Yeah.
Sterling. No.
Hi, my name's Nathan Cross, and I've been a 10-year resident of the area. And I think I'm a little confused. I guess the part of me that's confused is, why would we not want to take on this particular proposal and look at it when it would be partly self-funded so that it wouldn't impact the city and its budget? Sitting on the Financial Advisory Committee, one of the things we look at is when decisions are made by the committee or recommendations are made to City Council, we look at what does it do for the community? What does it do regarding bringing revenue into the community, drawing people into the community, supporting the community's whole ambiance of being a very special place to live? So I would think that the city would want to look at what can we do to really become take ourselves a step further into how we can become a committee of the future, a city of the future, rather than sitting back on our laurels and always saying everything's fine, let's not push too hard, let's not look too far into the future. And oftentimes that's where things get stagnant. Looking at what Jamie's proposal has been and the way that he explained it, where this would be partially self-funded, to me makes sense. And I would think that you'd want to study it further, because ultimately something's going to have to be done. And it kind of bothers me that we always say, oh, bring it back in 1 or 2 years. All it does is postpone the inevitable. And who knows, in 1 or 2 years, it might be that much more expensive to build. There may not be people who are willing to come forward to put in the hotel and to share the funding structures. So you've got a TOT tax that's built now that would help fund this. You've got some really great ideas about continuing to help maintain its self-funding. Why not grab it now? Why not take it forward now? At the least, look at it carefully and take community input and present it in a way that lets people understand more thoroughly how things are going to be funded. Because I hear comments tonight of people still aren't clear, and they've come up to this podium and have explained their confusion by saying, how are we going to pay for it? And Jamie has already expressed how it's going to be paid for. So it's evident there's more information that needs to go out to the community. I encourage you to form that committee, to tap into the community, and then make your decision about whether you move forward or not. Thanks.
Thank you, Nathan. Okay, we seem to have depleted all the comments. Let's move it back to council. Start off, Michael, please.
Mr. City Manager, could you put back the Group 4 graphic? I just want to editorialize to start my comments. Can we all agree that whoever did this did not come from Capitola? So we understand that. I want to put that as a baseline, because when you get a consultant, as good as a consultant may be, they do not know the heart of a community. That's a given. These projects are not inexorably connected. In other words, a new city hall doesn't mean absolutely positively a hotel has to be built, nor does a new parking structure mean a new city hall, and vice versa. You know, we're connecting these. I know it's a beautiful thing, and it makes a lovely puzzle, especially with the funding, but they're separate, and we need to look at them separately. We may be able to digest a new parking structure. The community may not be able to digest an 80-room hotel this close to a residential neighborhood. I don't know. Perhaps it could. Perhaps a smaller one. Perhaps retail on the first floor and 2 stories of residences. Maybe that's where this could go. Who knows? I do know one thing, that I think we need to direct staff to take more time. I don't think the few months they've given us is enough. I think we need to look at this being perhaps reported back to council in November. And we should start with the mayor forming a subcommittee of citizens to help drive the community outreach. We are always ardent about community outreach, and we are abysmally poor at making it happen. We have a meeting at Jade Street, and I can right now give you the 10 names of the people who will arrive. I think we all can. Let's get those 10 people and put them on the committee and see how we're going to get the rest of the community involved in this. One quick note, and I think that's going to be my recommendation. Let's take a year. It's worthy of being considered. My friend Nels, you know I love you, and you know I love you, and you're my neighbor. This is in no way a hidden agenda project. If it were a hidden agenda project, the first notice you would have of it would be bulldozers rolling down the street. That's not the way it went. We've been talking about a parking structure for 20 years. We asked our fine city manager, how are we going to build a parking structure? He came up with a possibly harebrained, possibly genius idea. We're not sure yet. But until we bring it to the community, which is what we're doing now, and talk about it, we're not going to be clear on it. So that is my recommendation. And $25,000 for a consultant, maybe not so much right now. I think we need to take a month or two with the subcommittee, formulate a plan, then perhaps a little money to Anderson Brule to sketches, some estimates. That would be money well spent, but not maybe at the current time. That's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
I think I got the name right. Steve Woodside, right? Right. You know, I'm glad you got on that train. Or your parents, or your grandparents. Great-grandparents. And, you know, I'm really glad they got on that train. What Steve talked about was perspective, thinking about what we have now. As Mike talked about what we think of Capitola, who we are, and what we want it to be. I really appreciate that. We've also been talking about how to outreach. Susan talked about the ad hoc committee is going to spend a lot of effort in outreaching to the community and finding out what a library would mean to us, which is an important, integral part of any community, the library. Coming here, I asked my daughter, do you ever go to the library? She said, Dad, of course I go to the library. I walk there all the time and I love it. This is my kid. And there's a lot of kids in this community that like doing that. A lot of parents, a lot of older folks like me, we love going to the library. So outreach is going to be important for any project we do, but it's also a dirty effort. It's hard to do. So I completely agree with Mike. We need to have an outreach committee, a mayor's committee, you know, a select committee. The ad hoc committee version of Capitola's civic involvement has been very successful. Look at the traffic committee. Look at the library committee. They brought to the city things that work. And that's the critical thing here, things that work. So I think Molly talked about timing. That's another thing we have to think about. Right now, to me, on the agenda for Capitola is making the library work. Get the community behind that so we could fund it. That will only happen when the community has a chance to put their word in so they know what the library is going to be like and it answers what they want. I want Capitola's next project to work. So Molly is correct. Timing is important. Give the mayor's committee that's going to work on what to do with City Hall, with the parking structure, some time to percolate ideas and come up with some proposals. Financing again will be critical. I didn't want to put Jamie on the spot, but you have to put staff on the spot when it comes to financing. We have a lot of ideas that are great, but we can't do them unless we can finance them. So I agree with Ed completely. But I don't want to stop the community moving forward. And that's what Steve got me thinking about. So I support the ad hoc committee. I don't want to move forward with right now. I want to move forward with the library. Thank you.
I'm going to not support moving forward with the project tonight. I just finished walking most of the town, and a lot of people did not bring it up. When I brought it up, there was no interest. The few people that said, what do I hear about a new city hall? I said, you know, some people are talking about it, some people want it. You know, I think what we ought to do is respond to community needs, and we're not seeing a need for a new city hall right now. We're not seeing a new urgent need for a police department. Yes, it'd be nice to have a nice new one. It'd be nice to have a new city hall. We're working on the library. I think we'll wait and see how this parking structure or the parking lot works out, and then if we need another parking structure, we can talk about that. But there's not really an urgent need for this right now. The community's not feeling it. It feels like we're trying to talk people into something. It really does to me. And I'm not comfortable doing that at all. And so I think that's what you're going to find. I think you're going to vote for it. You're going to go out there and you're going to talk to people and they're going to say, what? And it's going to be like, you're going to be talking people into it. Or not. But, you know, we just went to the voters, you know, to help us out financially. Now we're looking at a new city hall. You know, that's a non sequitur with me. You know, maybe down the road, but not right now. You don't go to voters and then 2 years, because you need money, and 2 years later, you know, even if it's self-funding, even if it's mostly self-funding, they don't see that. They just see city needs more money, we'll help them out, and then now they're looking at a new civic center. Why are we even calling it a civic center in Capitola? That doesn't even fit Capitola, I don't think. You know, that doesn't fit Capitola. You know, let's take things one at a time. We have a small staff. We have a lot of projects. Public Works is totally overwhelmed. Public Planning is totally overwhelmed. The code enforcement is going great guns. You know, we're doing everything hopefully right. We're serving the public. We provide wonderful police service and Public Works and so forth. You know, I don't see putting this on our work program right now. I'm sorry. You know, if people want to keep talking about it, go right ahead and talk about it. But the public is not asking for this right now. The public doesn't need it. We don't need it. It's way too expensive, whoever pays for it. We're just talking about stuff that's out of scale and character with Capitola. I think the General Plan Committee just did their work. So wait till they meet again and then talk about it again. It wasn't embraced by them then. It's not, you know, it's like going around the General Plan Committee in a way. We had that process to identify these kind of projects and move forward with them. It wasn't identified. So, you know, that feels uncomfortable too as far as planning. So I think, you know, we may have a tsunami, who knows? We may, you know, the pipe break was something else. Yes, it's good to have the police out of the floodplain. We can look at other solutions for that, but you know, this package deal right now to move forward with it when there's nobody behind it. You know, you don't have community groups, neighborhood groups, business groups, you know, coalition of groups saying, you know, we really think this is a good idea. And I know you're thinking, well, you know, when we go to them with these great ideas, they're going to say it's a great idea. I don't think so. You know, they want basic services, police, Public Works, good streets, sidewalks. We need to work on ADA stuff. We have so many other things to work on that this is going to suck money and time out of our staff and out of council members who are going to work on it. So I'm not going to support it.
Thanks. You know, I think it was some really good public comment tonight. It was all over the place. It was all inspiring. It was all had a lot of facts. For me, it was helpful because we're supposed to come here and not make a decision until we hear the public testimony. And sometimes I was discouraged by what was said, but I was encouraged by some things. And the phrase that came up to me was a phrase, it's called seriously considered. It's like we never seriously considered. And that phrase was used in reference to the beach parking lot 2 or Lower Pack Cove. And I think it's kind of funny when people say we talked about building this and building that, but the fact of the matter is that land was never available to consider anything until 2 years ago. You couldn't have considered putting a library there or a city hall there because the land wasn't available. It was mobile homes. And the catastrophe of the broken pipe and all the people that lost their homes and how horrible that was gave Capitola the best thing it ever had, about 5.5 acres of usable land. And I remember when the council went through that and when we approved the temporary parking lot, another one of the temporary structures in Capitola, people said we want our open space back. I think one of the comments was made was, you know, the worst thing we ever do is leave that as a temporary parking lot because people wanted that open space back. And then they also said in the same breath, we want a parking structure. You know, well, the fact is, it's a great idea. It's got to be paid for. And the third thing is the citizens that I heard said, I don't want to pay for that parking structure. The tourists use it, I don't, they should pay for it. So you add all those things up and the challenge is give back the open space, build the parking structure, and citizens don't want to pay for it, which means that we've got to be creative. So the city manager comes up with a plan and he says, and you know, I'll be honest, it is not a hotel or a parking structure or a city hall. It's all three. Because the way that this self-funds itself, and that's the key phrase, is nobody wants to pay for it. The creative part is to come up with a way to fund it. Funding is going to come through a hotel, because the hotel is going to generate TOT tax, which the records you can look at have been generating the biggest increase in revenue into Capitola in probably the past 3 years. Our sales tax is questionable. Our mall stability is questionable. I think the city of Capitola needs to look at outside sources of revenue. So when you look at the three, if you don't build all three, one of the big things we're looking at is getting the CBG grants that was mentioned. You don't qualify for those grants unless you provide work opportunities. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because all I'm doing here is confusing people, because what the people of Kappa don't have is the facts. They don't have the information. City manager has boatloads of it. We get it, we read it, we look through it, we try to talk to the people we know, and the fact of the matter is the person on the street has no idea what we're talking about. And so the challenge here is for us to make an idea or a recommendation that we think is in the best interest of Capitola, and let the citizens make that choice. And when I say to citizens, my misconception here is, I've been to these community outreaches. We did it for the general plan. We started out with 80 people at the first one, and by the last meeting there were 9 people. And what we need to do is find a way to get, one thing is not to create another committee that has the same people that sign up for all the committees all the other time, and we get the same recommendation. The one thing I found, and Jacques will attest to this, he just got done walking all the streets, is there's 10,000 people here, and of those about 6,000 vote. And of those, at least 3,000 have an opinion, because those are the ones that show up to vote. So I would like to the reason I'm in favor of this, the reason I was in favor of it last time, was the guy that was behind it I thought was a credible person. I was willing to have him carry the ball with this project. Coming back to us now, we're going to carry our own ball. It's going to be staff-driven. But the concept still remains the same. The concept is, let's take a look. Let's answer the question, can we afford to build a parking structure? Will it pay for itself? And with regards to moving the city hall and the services out of the floodplain, you know, it was a broken pipe, it wasn't a flood. Everybody's correct. Everybody that lived on the river, it hasn't flooded yet. But the people in Boulder Creek, when they had the mudslide, did they think there were going to be a mudslide? And when Soquel Dam, or Soquel had the flood that inundated the entire town, did they think that was going to happen? I worked 30 years in the fire service, and I can tell you right now, I've been to many fires, many houses, many catastrophes where people had said, never thought this was going to happen. And I think the big challenge to this council is not to make a decision to spend money that we don't have, but to always consider what's our job to make sure that we provide for the future of Capitola. And with regards to the picture that was up there, I guarantee you, if we ever build something, it's not going to look like that. I mean, we have so many people in Capitola that care what this town looks like. Because in the center of my triangle that has hotel, public services, the facilities, and the parking structure is the word quaint. Because that's the quintessence of what happens in this town. At whatever we do, we have to maintain that. I think that a hotel would probably increase the vibrancy of the village. I think the village is hanging on by a thread, in my personal opinion. You know, good or bad, we all say we don't like it. We do like it. The tourists, we deal with them. The tourists are here to stay. I got a feeling even if we shut down all the services, they're still going to come and lay on the beach. So I'm in favor of whatever it takes to inform the public of a true process. It's all out in the open, and at the end of the day, if we cannot show that we can do a hotel, a parking structure, and a new city hall, and it's not going to come out of the general fund, and it's not going to cost people, if we can show that, then it's worth moving forward. And if we can't, then we leave it like it is. So I'm not going to be in favor of postponing this. I'd like to take some action. You know, when I got elected, people said they want change in this town. They want to do something. We've been postponing things forever, and this is not a vote to do anything. It's a vote to inform you of what's going on and to take a look at it.
Thank you, Ed.
Can I just ask a question, though, first? Because I want to have, this is such an important issue. I really want to have some discussion among the council members if we have any questions from each other about what was said, though. But what I'm interested in is starting at square one. Why even begin this whole process until we know that there's a need? Do we know that there's a need for a parking structure? No, we don't know that yet.
We have heard that from 3 different committees in the last 20 years.
We don't know that since we've built the new lot. And so I think we need to take a look at the new lot, and if we need it, we can talk about it. But we're going to be spending a lot of time and money and effort, perhaps, on something that may not be needed. And so why not wait and see if it's needed? We don't know yet.
Well, we had a definite message from our GPAC committee. that Lower Pacific Cove needs to go back to open space. And
That was
a definite message from them. There was a definite message when it came to council that the council agreed.
I'd like to see the minutes of the vote of that action and how many people voted in that, because I think that
Okay.
that may have happened at the very end, and there were less than 10 people on the committee. So I'd like, that's, you got to put everything in context.
Jock was there.
I was there, and believe me, I was part of the originating of that idea way before the GPAC came, and that is a true sentiment that has expanded throughout Capitola, I have to admit. And I just have a few comments to make. Mr. Mayor, may I speak?
Yes, you can, John.
Okay. I'd like to reiterate what Ed talked about. I don't want to give up on what you said, Ed. And, Jamie, our city manager, thanks for coming up with a proposal that is a hard nut to chew. It really is. And, you're dealing with some realities here that Ed talks about. We have some issues that we do have to take care of, okay? And as Steve talked about, we have to look forward. So I appreciate that. But I think we need some time, and maybe I'm speaking to you, Ed. I think we need, because I don't want to let go of what you said. I think we need some time for this to percolate. We need to, and Stephanie, I agree with you too. We put some things in place here right now, like the new parking lot, which I hope I see that as open space. I really do. As a park for kids, as a park for people to come to, that really makes central down. That was my vision. Central downtown Capitola with a park we could be proud of. A place to go to. There's pictures of old Capitola before they had the mobile home park of town picnics. I've seen them at the History Museum. I mean, it was a central spot for Capitola residents and community life. I would love to see that again. And that's my vision. Alan DeGrange, he and I, and Dennis, we talked about that from the beginning. So I want that open. But what Ed talks about is real. It's going to be hard to solve this. It really is. But I want to see the ideas percolate through the community. And what you said, Stephanie, is true. I'm walking around knocking on people's doors, and no one had heard about it. Yes, GPAC had talked about it. City staff has talked about it because these are real issues. We have a parking problem, okay, before the second cove. So it takes a while for a real solution to come up, and it has to well up from the community. So I just want to see that take time. And that's why I agree with Mike that let's have another ad hoc committee, and that's not pushing it down the road. That's giving the community a chance to have their say and understand the issues. And Ed was right. We have to understand the issues before we could come up with a solution.
Even turning the parking lot into a park has not been widely accepted or known by the community.
That's true.
That is not an issue that the majority of people in the community know anything about. So we can't say today we're going to do it. We can't say today it's the best thing for the community. We can't say today that everybody's accepting of it, because they're not.
I agree with you.
We have to first look at, do we need that to continue it for parking?
Right.
And we don't know yet. We won't know for some time.
And I agree with you.
So let's look at that.
I agree.
And then we'll know. I don't want to spin our wheels on a whole lot of things that we don't have time and energy and money for, or a need for. Let's look at the need first. And where's the need? Show me.
My turn?
All about you, Mr. Mayor. It's all about you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, this will be the most expensive project in the history of the city, but let's take a look at the projects the city has done. We built a library, and we built it on 2 mobile homes because we didn't have the money to build it. Very limited budget. We built a community center that cost us virtually nothing because it was all done by volunteer labor and design. The first project we could say that the city's had, whether it be the Corporation Yard building or this building here, see these panels on these walls right here? You know what those are? Those are doors to a garage. This was a car repair shop right here. And it was converted. Doug Messini did a great design, and they built on top of it. But it was built long enough ago. It doesn't meet today's state earthquake standards. It doesn't meet floodplain standards. There's a number of issues. It's antiquated, both in design and the layout for a good community room here. This is comfortable for us. But what happens upstairs, there's limitations. So Are we in need of a new city hall? Maybe not this year, or maybe not next year, and maybe not 3 years from now. But 5 years from now or 10 years from now, it certainly would be a consideration to do it. So let's look at all the possibilities out here. Where do you move City Hall besides on property that we own? Rispin? I don't think so. I think Rispin would be pretty expensive, and also you have a little trouble parking over there. You're going to build a library over there. We've agreed to that. McGregor, too far out of town. It's already got a use. It's going to be a public park as it is. Monterey Park, possibly. I don't think the neighbors would like that very much to bring City Hall and put it up there. They have enough trouble with what's going on there now. So what we had asked Jamie to do was look at the possibilities of where, if we were to relocate City Hall, take our city's first response services out of a floodplain, which we should do. Global warming is a reality. It isn't just flooding from the river. It's over time we're gonna have water issues in this town. And so planning ahead and doing this process, the people who want to stop the process right now, that's stopping the public process. There is no public process. If you pull the plug on this right now, there is no public process. It's just done. So I'm going to go along with this. I think we should move into a public process. I need to discuss more what the public process is and how we handle that.
Right.
And I agree with Mike. I think this isn't a process that happens in 3 months. I think it happens in a year. We need to explore all possibilities, and maybe, and like you suggested, Mike, maybe they have to stand alone. Maybe the parking garage has to stand alone by itself. How do we fund that if we want to do it there? Make a series of answers, or create the questions and then look for the answers to them. But I think there's what's brought up in this threesome here are all needs within the community. We do in some way need a hotel. I don't know that this is the right spot for a hotel, nor do I know that the theater property is the right spot. And also we've got a pretty stern message, maybe from the community, as well as the water department, that building a hotel may not even be feasible. And maybe I think we've all read something from this last water board election that there seems to be a lot of sentiment in this community that any large-scale growth doesn't seem to be very viable within the acceptance of the community. So there's a lot of decisions to be made here, but I think the only way we can explore those decisions is to have a public process. And so I would like more discussion as how we formulate a public process here. But I'll go along with you, Mike. I think a year's process with this thing, and looking at it as a whole and taking it apart is the answer for this community.
I have a perspective motion.
Okay.
Should be pretty benign. Shouldn't send the city manager into too many fits. I don't think we should set a time limit on this. I don't think we should say come back to us in July, August, September, November. Let's not put a time limit on it. This is not a race. This is a careful consideration. So I would like to delay the $25,000 allocation for the consultant. It could come back to us in the next 2 or 3 months, but the first thing we should do is have the mayor, I move that we have the mayor form a committee of not more than 10 residents to come back to this body with a plan for public outreach. We can bless it, send that subcommittee on its way, and begin the process. And I think that's as far as we should go tonight reasonably.
I second. Can I just add to that committee selection, just some input?
Sure.
My concern is I would love to see a cross-section of Capitola. I would like to see what happened in GPAC, where there were districts that were represented. So we don't end up with 5 people on Escalona Drive determining, what we do.
Well, that's sort of why I'm requesting the mayor to name the committee. I'm reluctant to say each one of us has an appointment. Not necessary. I believe the mayor, as a friendly amendment, that this committee should be comprised of no more than 10 citizens,
okay,
and they should represent different areas of Capitola.
I think GPAC had, was it 9 members that were geographically representative? So something that would adhere to a geographical representation, that's all.
It was 5. It was 5 and then 4 from outside city council.
Right.
But anyway, some kind of a good geographical cross-section.
Okay.
And none of us need to sit on it. I don't think any elected or other appointeds need to necessarily sit on it. Let's let the citizens come to us and give us a recommendation on how we should reach out to the rest of the community. That's what I believe we're looking for from this 10 or fewer committee.
Does that complete
But
your motion, Mike?
I think the need needs to be articulated. What are we looking for? What is the goal here? What is our problem? What is the problem we're trying to solve? What is, the public is, it still is not sure
Well, that's
exactly
what I want them. That's what I want them to tell us. If truly a hotel is something after the committee and after the public outreach, if a hotel is something that is just not acceptable on the site, then let's hear that information. If a parking structure is sorely needed because of open space, or open space and no parking structure, whatever the mix is, I'm not ready to discuss that here tonight. I want the citizens to discuss it and come back and give us the voice of the people. So, you know my motion?
The motion is just to select a group. It's not, nothing else.
It is for the mayor to form a subcommittee from different areas of Capitola and to direct them to bring back to this body a plan for public outreach. As simple as that. That's the first step. Because like I said, we always try and do public outreach. We have our community meetings at Jade Street. We have our meetings here. And we have the same.
Why don't you just reconvene the
Doesn't do
GPAC? Ask them again.
Because the
This
GPAC,
is their job.
I cannot say that the GPAC was our golden moment in government. Okay, and anyone who was associated with it would agree.
And 2 of the GPAC members are up here, so we don't want those people on the board.
Absolutely not. No, I'm only kidding. What I'm saying is we had massive consultant fees. We had a very beautiful report. It was very nicely bound. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for grassroots common sense. And I know it's out here. I know this community has a lot of creativity, and we can do this. And if there is a need found, we can find a way to do it, maybe not necessarily doing every single part of this plan. There may be one element of this plan that's needed, that's wanted. If that's one element is open space, maybe this community can tell us how to do it with or without a parking structure.
I second your motion.
Thank you.
I already seconded it, but anyway.
Well, my concern is that we're going to the public, what are we asking them for? What are we asking them for? We're just saying to the public, what do you want to do on this site?
All we're asking this subcommittee to do is bring us a plan for public outreach. There's no consultant. There's not a lot of staff time. There's a small group of citizens, active citizens, we all know who they are, who will get together and bring us a plan to bring in the rest of the community. The ones that are usually sitting at home, the ones that didn't go to GPAC, that don't go to the Traffic and Safety Committee, that don't sit in any other committees in the city. We want to get the people who walk around the city all the time, and we never take the time to draw them out and get their
you think you're
opinion.
going to get them to come to a meeting here?
Not me.
Here tonight. Who's here tonight?
No, the committee's sitting out there
The
right
people
now.
that are interested. I'm
I know
sorry,
that.
I'm being a little argumentative.
No, I
But
see the
if
committee
you
is
think
out
the
there right
people-
now.
The people that are interested are here tonight, and they've told us what they think.
Right. And some of them
And we
told
haven't
us,
heard?
I heard anything from don't do anything, leave everything the way it is forever, to build everything the city manager has recommended.
Well, yeah, but I still want to hear a need. What is the need that we have that we're trying to fix?
This is
What-
not a time for us to have answers. This is time for us to pose questions. So
No, we should have answers to that basic question. Why are we doing this?
I think we've given a reason, Stephanie. We have a floodplain issue. We have a aging of structures. We have
No, I understand that.
a community
I
that's
understand that. I'm
asking.
just saying today, you
Yeah.
know, that we can look, I'm saying never look at these things. I'm just saying it's not an immediate need. We have other immediate things we're working on. Let's work on those. Let's work on this somewhere down the line, because it's not an immediate need for us.
Okay, we have a motion, a second on the floor. Roll call, please.
Councilmembers Harlan.
No.
Bodorf.
Yes.
Bertrand.
Yes.
Termini.
Aye.
And Mayor Norton.
Aye. Motion carries 4-1. Thank you very much. Thank you, public, for showing up.
Take a 5-minute recess. Look at you to leave.
Yes, 5-minute recess, please.
Reset the cameras. Put some more makeup
Guys,
on.
we're
Yeah.
Did you notice the new lights?
Yeah, it's great.
Nice
aren't they?
lights, huh?
They're not
much
glary,
better.
are they?
Wait a minute.
They're better.
I mean, I can
What I got
see you
is
guys.
that looks like
Can
a
you see me? I mean,
floodlight, and
it's
somebody's got
great.
a high-tech light over there.
was there, and I said, I was in there when she complained, and I said, hey, Mrs. Park, we're going to pave the whole street this year. She goes, oh, okay. And she goes, well, there's really bad part of it, because it's really bad, but it's on our radar. I remember her. I remember going to the restaurant. Thank you. And we also, we had a country
Okay, we move to item 10 D, which is review results of the Safe Routes to School survey, actually financed by the city and the county of Santa Cruz. Steve, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The item before you tonight is a report on a Safe Routes to School survey and audit that was conducted. It was actually a grant we had received from Caltrans, the SoCal Union Elementary School applied for the grant. We co-sponsored it with them as the local public agency. We received the grant, and it was strictly to look at identifying barriers to students to walking and riding bikes to the school campuses. This study included all 4 campuses at that time within the school district, which are Santa Cruz Gardens, Main Street, SoCal Elementary, and then New Brighton Middle School within the city of Capitola. The work was done by Kimley Horn and Associates. They went out and conducted surveys, conducted field audits, and prepared a report. It was not a full-scale Safe Routes to School grant report that was developed. That was not intended in the grant that we received, but it was an audit of impediments, if we can. So with that, I'd like to invite Mike Mowry from Kimley Horn and Associates, who prepared the report, to come up and give you a report, and he's available to answer questions.
Thank you for joining us, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. I want to start this evening by and generally presenting the project overall, and then talking a little bit more about New Brighton, specifically since it's inside the city's jurisdiction, where the other 3 schools are inside the county area. Again, my name is Michael Mowry from Kimley Horn. We worked with the city and the school district on this, and the county, excuse me, on this project starting last January. Wrapping up, we gave a presentation to the school board in late November as their last meeting for that calendar year, and coming to you tonight to present the findings of the study as well, specific to New Brighton. Some project background real quick. Safe Routes to School was really started in the early 90s. California was a leader in this field, starting at the first state to have a Safe Routes to School grant program. The federal government actually followed on in the early 2000s, and for a long time, for the 2000s, there was 2 programs to present grant funding, both at the state level and the federal level. The city, as Steve noted, along with the district, applied for the federal Safe Routes to School money, which didn't require a match, but primarily for the district. In general, Safe Routes to School, this program, as it sounds, is encouraging more children to bike and walk to work. The statistic that's often quoted is surveys in the 1950s, 1960s had approximately 65 to 75% of the students, depending on what survey you look at, walking to school. And now it's about the flip of that. It's more like about 25% of students potentially in communities walking to school. And so why is that not happening? You know, there's a lot of studies on that, whether it's the sociology behind it with 2 parents working, if it's just general concern for stranger danger around schools. I mean, there's a lot of factors certainly involved in that. But specifically, the district applied for a grant to look at physical impediments on the walking and biking routes that may be prohibiting children from walking and biking to school, and then also taking a survey to better get into and understand what those other impediments may be beyond the physical roadways or physical pathways on the roads. Again, talking about the schedule, we kicked off the project in January of last year. We then had a meeting with actually the entire district, where the principal, vice principal, and PTA members from each school joined us to talk about the process overall for the program, and then also to narrow down what that group would like to see in the survey. We conducted an online survey, which I will summarize here in a moment. In May of last year, we conducted the field audits. Each of these audits consisted of going out to the schools, working again with the administration and staff, as well as local parent representatives, and we let the school help us with that. and then also the city or county, depending on where the school is located, to go out and observe a pickup and or drop off, and to see what was happening around the school. So physically and visually see what was happening, what were the safety concerns, what were children doing, were there any unsafe practices by both parents and students, to note those and then start to brainstorm ideas how we might be able to improve those locations. At the same time, we also prepared the online survey for parents and students to answer, and looking at those impediments, whether again being stranger danger, the lack of sidewalks or pedestrian paths, bicycle facilities, and other factors. We brought that information back to the district in August, and met with the site councils immediately after that to go over the initial recommendations. With that same group, got feedback, and then presented to the school board and to yourselves this evening. As I said, the walking and biking audits, we started off with a kickoff meeting. We conducted that audit. We asked the schools what they felt was the worst condition, either the morning drop-off or the evening or afternoon pickup, and so we surveyed the site at that time. We were looking for mainly infrastructure improvements, and that's what the grant was for. Safe Routes to School is a larger program that you'll hear education, enforcement certainly by local police departments, and county sheriff, encouragement, again, more programs, usually at the school and district level, to encourage more biking and walking, and then also education for those same matters. This program was focused specifically at the engineering portion and the infrastructure improvements that could be suggested and completed. Touching on the survey, this is a summary of the results for all 4 schools that were surveyed. We had 800 respondents, so obviously we didn't get all of the students and parents. And it was these results would be a little bit different school by school. You can see here that the majority, over 50%, are still using private vehicles as their typical mode to school. But there is actually a good component of carpooling, biking and walking. I know these numbers are a little different than some of the other surveys that have been done in the local area by either the county or other groups, but I think I've done a lot of Safe Routes to School in Northern California, and they're relatively consistent. They actually might be a little bit higher than we've tended to see. What also happens with these surveys often is it's the group that's very energetic about walking and biking to school, and so they want to take the survey. And so sometimes when we get these results where we're asking people to participate, we also get slightly higher participation from those that are interested in the program. So we'll see slightly higher modes for walking and biking. As I said, we asked people what they're most concerned about and a little less concerned about. Most concerned about was really speeding around schools. Too much traffic in general on the route, unsafe intersections for students to cross, and then stranger danger. A little less concerned about knowing in general the best route to school. People felt like they had their route or would decide otherwise. I know it came up early in the process about the skateboarding rules in the village, and so we include that in the survey. That was of less concern. Violence and crime in the neighborhoods, and then lack of bike parking. People felt like there was sufficient bike parking at the campuses. In general, the reports that were produced late last year had an introduction talking about the overall program, some of the information individually about the schools, survey results specific to the schools, including what routes people were taking now, generally what roadways or pathways they were using, results of the field audit, and then proposed Safe Routes to School elements, infrastructure improvements. In general, and this isn't specific to New Brighton, some of the sample recommendations, there were some recommendations for changing or adding new crossing guard locations, some school speed limit signs, because you can do double fines in those areas to help with the enforcement aspect, installing new crosswalks and pedestrian ramps at a number of locations, rectangular rapid flashing beacon crossings. This was just installed this last summer in front of SoCal along Capitola with the flashing signs in concert with the crossing. That is a recommendation near New Brighton. Some red curve for parking. There's a lot of parking right at the corners in some of the neighborhoods around the schools. creating sight distance problems for children. New Brighton's obviously little middle school, so we're talking about slightly taller students, but at elementary ages, we're looking at that 3.5 to 4.5 foot height, and an SUV very easily can block a sight line for a vehicle turning a corner and for a student to be hit. And then installing sidewalk where it made sense for gap closure. One of the surprising aspects of sidewalk is it's one of the more expensive engineering things we can do in neighborhoods. If you imagine you don't have a place to drain the water, or you have a place to drain the water right now, and then you raise everything by 6 inches, it just becomes an engineering expense. So we like to look at that as gap closure rather than, say, installing sidewalks throughout a whole neighborhood, because it can get very costly, and we feel you can use those improvements in other locations. On the screen is a map of the improvements around New Brighton. I won't hit on all the improvements, but I did discuss a few of them as I was presenting now. We are recommending a new crossing. My cursor won't work there, but to the northern part of the campus. There is a crossing there right now, but it's widely used by students, and so we're looking at enhancing that with an RRFB. It is near where the speed enforcement or speed feedback sign is now. There are locations where we're looking at adding sidewalk along Washburn. A lot of students walking up that roadway, and there's no good area for them to locate with vehicles parked along the residences. We're trying to minimize some of the entry into the school area from some of the neighborhoods to the south, and so we're looking at doing a no left turn along Loma, so that can continue to become pedestrian friendly, really narrow roadways right now, and disallow some of that private vehicle traffic there during school periods only. Monterey Avenue, unfortunately, and this is why we do the field audits, we did see probably the majority of students that were biking going up Monterey, but they were doing it on the sidewalks. And it's because, and we've heard this back from students and their parents, they didn't feel safe even with the bike lane on Monterey. So we've recommended doing a green bike lane treatment. We're seeing it more and more in California now, to continue to enhance that visually along Monterey Avenue. Excuse me. We have some new crosswalk treatments at Monterey and Washburn. Again, it's probably the major crossing location for the school. And then there's elements on-site as well. On-site they have a relatively efficient pickup and drop-off, but they have some double parking where it's happening, and also just some stacking for the vehicles. In general, when I look at these school areas and do the walking audits, I'm looking overall, can we improve the safety around the school for vehicles as well as the bikes and peds. If we can limit that congestion, perhaps more people would feel comfortable with their students walking and biking if the parents that are choosing to drive their vehicle are doing so safely. Probably one of the unique recommendations in this report, which doesn't always happen with these Safe Routes to School reports, is a alternative drop-off location. Right around the school is quite congested, as many of you are familiar, and there is a very close access to the lower parking lot that the city just recently built. And so we looked at this as an alternative drop-off location. In general, I've shown how that may work for vehicles coming into the parking lot around Bay and circulating. What you would do, and it may not be exactly this number, but you would disallow parking in maybe up to 10 parking spaces and allow that to be your new kind of drop-off and pickup just during school times. And then some other features that we like to see in pick-up and drop-off areas, if there's room, is kind of a pull-ahead area if a student isn't there, so that it doesn't queue up the line. The nice piece of this, design of this parking lot, which would work great for a school pick-up and drop-off, is it actually has a natural recirculation. So if your student's not there, rather than holding up the whole line, you can actually go around the circle and do it again. Parents don't love that option, but it works well with the design that this lot has. We presented this to the school district, and they are interested in the idea. I think at this time, the matter that they were looking at is connected to insurance and when the school takes responsible charge of the students and how all those pieces fit together in making this work for the district, and how they would also facilitate it with some of their staff during these times. So they're looking at the logistics of making this work, and I know after that they'll talk to Steve, and the group can maybe find a way to make this work. But that's kind of the step the district is at this time. On the draft reports that we presented, probably the general comments that we got, in general we tried to include all the comments that we received for other additions that may not have been in the initial reports. We often, when we do these reports, get requests for elements that are difficult for us to recommend, and usually the difficulty in us recommending those is that we're also balancing with Caltrans standards, the MUTCD, some of these traffic standards, rules, and laws that we have to follow as engineering design guidelines. And so, unfortunately, not all of the recommendations we always receive as part of these reports, as well as they would work, are always something we can design. ADA would be another example of that. And then also just the desire for the school reports to cover kind of all the district traffic safety issues, or all the cities or counties' traffic safety issues. It just wasn't inside the scope of the grant that was received. The county did receive a grant last fall for implementing some of these infrastructure improvements, which will be funding a new RRFB in front of the Main Street Elementary School. And throughout the county. So some of these grant improvements are already seeing shape that were recommended as part of these reports. And then some of these specific additions that were included, as well as some others, the green bike lanes on Bay Avenue we just talked about, an alternative route for the new Brighton remote pickup and drop off, kind of coming in from the parking lot rather than just from Bay. Additional improvements on Soquel Wharf, which is a major safety location and crossing near Soquel Elementary, and then some additional improvements near the Main Street exit to better delineate where pedestrians and vehicles should go. And then I just put this graphic up. This is kind of more of a exterior view, not just of New Brighton, but also includes all the schools except for Santa Cruz Gardens, showing the potential bike lane improvements, sharrows along Bay that I believe the city is looking at right now, sharrows along Washburn, again the city is looking at, and then the report does talk about a bike lane, looking at a bike lane along Monterey between Washburn and Park. I know talking to Steve, the city council has directed staff to start a study on that as well. Next steps really is coordination with the district with both the county and the city on these improvements. How it usually works, and we've listed it in the report, is I try to put short-term, moderate, and long-term timelines on these elements. Short-term tends to be the things that I think of as district staff or city staff or county staff being able to do as part of their maintenance crew, whether it be new signs or maybe some new striping for a red curb. Moderate turn items maybe require some additional funding through the general fund and would have to come to council or other committees. And then longer term tend to be the elements that you would combine multiple schools or multiple locations and seek grant funding at a larger portion, or countywide funding, some kind of pedestrian and bicycle safety funding for those improvements. And then just as, again, timing-wise, based on those grants, this spring for statewide, the ATP Cycle 2 grant, which is essentially the latest version that incorporates Safe Routes to School grant dollars, will be coming out this spring for application. With that, I'll open up for any questions.
Any questions of mine? Ed?
I don't see on the map here differentiating between, or if there is, between where there's an actual bike lane or sharrows, or do you consider those the same, or how does that work?
We essentially I think we call them bike lane, but we designate them. We designate as bike lanes, but it isn't differentiated on the map.
Okay, there's just one. The symbol just could be either or.
Correct.
So my question to that is it a bike lane on Park, or is it sharrows and bike? It's a full bike lane on Park?
Yes.
Okay. And I don't know if you can help with this, but the last question is, what is the width of street necessary to have 2 lanes of traffic, 2 lanes of parking, and 2 bike lanes?
You're looking at about 45 feet, including sidewalks.
To have
Right.
parking, is that parking on both sides?
Yeah, parking on both sides, sidewalks, streets. Yeah, I think I got it right.
That includes a sidewalk? No. That's just a street width.
Okay.
48.
Oh.
48. That's close.
48 to
Yeah.
have it all? And my
Yeah.
question is, do we know, or do you happen to know the width of Monterey and Kennedy?
Monterey, I do not know the width, but I know there is not width there to have parking on both sides, bike lanes on both sides.
Okay. That essentially
Right.
answers my question. It's not enough adequate to do both.
Right.
Thanks.
I have a question, Steve, while he's up there, almost. What if we had 2 lanes of traffic and a 2-way bike lane? Does that change the width and the dynamics at all?
You know, I don't. Two-way bike lanes are something I'd have to study. I know they tend, because right now you have 5-foot bike lanes, so if you're talking a 10-foot bike lane.
Well, I'm thinking of like an 8 or 9-foot bike lane. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to slice it so that we can fit everything in there because I think it's doable.
On Monterey, we're talking about. Not with parking on both sides. I still don't think there's adequate room, and I think there's functionally some problems with two-way bike lanes. That you
Functionally, there's
addressed at
problems with
intersection.
2-way streets.
Yes.
So, yeah.
All right, Mike. Calm.
Certainly on Gilroy, there's a problem with a 2-way street.
How about a question? Did you consider the parking at Monterey Park as a potential drop-off spot? We did not. Because it's like really close. It's definitely much closer than the new parking lot. Circulation would be an issue, but I live right across the street from New Brighton, and everyone has to go to the area in front of the the auditorium, I guess you call it that. They just have to go there, and they'll wait in line to turn in, and they could just as easily, and their kid could walk half a block to school. The other comment is, I was across the street when Capitola Elementary was there, and that crosswalk I think you referred to up near the school headquarters or the district headquarters got used then a little bit, but I don't see anyone use it now. I mean, the school district probably have a better idea, but no one uses it at all. Gosh, Steve, I just don't see anyone use it, period. There used to be a door there, a gate door, and that's been since padlocked off, and they could go through the driveway if anyone was going to use it. But the other thing, maybe this would be for Steve, is there some way to maybe make no parking on, let's say, the school side of the street for certain times, maybe switch them back and forth, because oftentimes parents stop in front of my house, wait for the kid runs across the street, they don't look both ways, and then the parent drives off. So, maybe something like that, making more options so they don't have to fight for parking places.
Certainly, we could, establish parking zones or time limits on parking or more red zones. I mean, those are all in the discretion within our muni code to control parking in certain areas. So we do have those options if we come up with a good one. A big part of it is, signage and enforcement to make people learn how that new zones are going to work. But you can put in white zones, yellow zones, anything like that we want.
And I have another idea. I don't know what the council would feel about this, but maybe passing this to our traffic committee and see what they think about it from a citizen standpoint.
Certainly a report we could share with them and get their feedback on.
Yeah, right, because that's what they're there for.
Stephanie? Okay.
I don't have any questions.
My question, a recent phenomenon in Southern California is it's cool to ride your bike. In other words, the junior highs are starting to experience a phenomenal amount of kids changing over now to riding a bike because it's cool to do that. Is that being seen in this area, or is it being seen any places in Northern California? And along with that, it appears from the survey that you did that very few students live in this area that go to the middle school. Seems like most of them live on the other side of the freeway or as far away as 41st Avenue area. In getting a cultural change of community to encourage kids to walk or to ride their bike, do you see a deterrent by the distance that they have to travel to go to this middle school? Is that you see that distance being a deterrent from them riding their bike or walking?
Thank you for your question, Mr. Mayor. The first, for encouragement, the districts that I've seen really start to encourage their students to ride more, and holding activity days to do so in education and bike rodeos is where you start to see those numbers really increase. A lot more districts are being involved in International Bike to School Day, National Bike and Walk to School Day. They're held intentionally in spring and fall, and I know that some of the local groups have worked with the schools to do that, and they tend to be actually the school's largest riding days. So I think it just takes time. As you said, it becomes kind of a community thing as students start to embrace it, and as they see their friends start to embrace it. From a distance standpoint, elementary school ages, we usually look at about half a mile. And some of that's just the age and bike skills. Parents will certainly have their kids on bikes before 2nd or 3rd grade, but a lot of studies feel like that's the comfortable age for students to ride with children to ride with traffic around the 8 or 9-year-old age, where they've got enough bike skills and balance in a traffic environment. And so you quickly lose half of the student population at elementary school. For middle school, usually closer to 1.5 miles, maybe 2 miles. On the outer edges, we might see students start to ride that. So to your point, part of it is the connection too, and we noted in our report along Capitola, which would be one of those reaches you discussed, trying to find a bicycle facility there, and the issue or the choke point there is really the bridge over the freeway. It's too narrow to really have a bicycle facility. So do you create a bicycle facility on both ends and some of the engineering with that, and then you just have that disconnect and accept it? As a community, you certainly can. Sometimes that creates a little issue with grant funding if you start to see it, because they like to see connection between bicycle facilities. But if it's more simplified and bike lanes and you can do it with more local, regional dollars, then that doesn't become as much of an issue.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. I see we have 3 of Capitola's bike experts sitting out there. Maybe they would like to make a comment to us.
4.
4.
At least.
5. 5. 4.
Daniel, he was recognized for...
Yeah, he's the one really.
That's right. Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Andy Ward. I am the City of Capitola's representative to Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Commission Bicycle Advisory Committee. I thank you for your time and for commissioning this report. I've been an avid cyclist and bicycle commuter since the early 90s. I've been commuting from Capitola to my work at Plantronics since roughly 1997, and I can confirm that there is no single area that strikes fear in the heart of pedestrians or cyclists than school zones. I do my best to avoid school zones during my commute because they're quite dangerous. I wholly encourage you to adopt this report. I guess if I were to criticize it, I would say that as a cyclist and an advocate for cycling, I'm not sure that it goes far enough. I'd like to see additional traffic, more aggressive traffic calming measures on Kennedy and Monterey Avenues in particular. Excuse me. The report alludes to a city plan to develop bike lanes along Kennedy and Monterey, but I'm not aware of any specific plans to do that. So certainly I'd like to see a little bit more activity in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Hi, my name's Steve Fiercy. You know me as the bicycle advocate, and I do a lot of volunteer work here in Capitola and SoCal to promote bicycling, especially within the school districts. I really thank Kimberly Horn for putting this report together. It's been something that's been sorely needed in our community. And I wanted to reiterate that it does focus on the infrastructure improvements that would help make it safer for people to bike and walk to school. And he did also mention that it does not really cover the things that are super important for human behavior, specifically enforcement, education, and encouragement. And those are the programs that can be developed. For example, the SoCal Union Elementary School District lacks a safe routes to school policy. And without a policy, it makes it very difficult for the community to know where the district is coming from. And you might have heard that the district's having a few problems with communication itself. So I would like, one point I would ask you to do is, and I regret I missed the school board meeting, is that the city encouraged the school district to adopt a safe routes to school policy. The second thing is that with all these programs that are out there, Ecology Action is a fantastic organization that does the biannual bike to work and school events. And they also run the Bike Smart program, which does bicycle rodeos in local school districts to give students education about how to ride a bicycle safely. And they also do the monthly bike, walk, and skate and roll to school events that where I volunteer over at New Brighton. And we're seeing about a 15% of students actively transporting themselves to New Brighton, even during the cold months of January. So I do hope that this plan is acknowledged as being for infrastructure, but we still need a lot of work done on the other 3 E's. So engineering, we got that, let's do the other 3 E's too. There were 2 other important things I wanted to note. On page 14, there is mention of developing Monterey Avenue as a bike lane, but it omitted Kennedy Drive. So we need to lock that into our brains that developing a contiguous route from Bay along Monterey Avenue to where it changes over to Kennedy Drive, intersects with McGregor at Park, that needs to have a nice, safe route to school there as well. And I'm glad that with the development of McGregor Park, that is getting some attention, and it's one thing that's getting a lot of support around the bicycling and pedestrian community. And lastly, on the one page on page 17, there's just a tiny mention of a road sign of bicycle and share the road. The preferred signage is now the R411, which is the bike may use full lane. So that's all I had for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
The one and only.
Good evening. I'm Daniel Kostelek. I'm your alternate to the Bicycle Committee at the Transportation Commission. And I want to say it's great to be back, have a chance to speak in this room. It's been a while. I worked, when I was a city employee, I developed the first bike plan. I don't even want to say how long ago that was. And in that plan, we were able to come back and retrofit bike lanes into streets with parking both sides. A good example of that is from Jade Street from 38th, crossed 41st all the way down to the community center. That used to be parking both sides. On the issue of the bike lane on Monterey Avenue, and Kennedy all the way to Park that you have directed Steve to take a look at. That's basically a 40-foot width, gutter line, curb to curb. And it will accommodate parking one side with 10 to 11-foot travel lanes and bike lane on the side you remove the parking from. That accomplishes a couple of things, and one of which is one of the main things that's highlighted in the tables here on page 5 on table 7 and 8 is parents not wanting their kids to bike because of the speed of the traffic and the amount of the traffic. And by reducing that lane to that minimum, which is actually the lane width you have on 41st Avenue that we had to go down to when we put the bike lanes on 41st Avenue about 15, 16 years ago. It's still a functional lane. You can see on 41st those trucks can still make their way down without scraping the people next to them. And it does help effectively slow the traffic. I know that's kind of a long-term project, and there's quite a few issues that need to be dealt with on dealing with that, and I'm anxious to assist as a committee member, Public Works, in doing that analysis. The last thing I wanted to say was, though, on the list of what they're calling long-term bicycle plan items, they have 3 others there. The Sharrows on Bay Avenue, which are actually there, they're just faded out, so they need to be re-stenciled. And the ones on Washburn that they're recommending, to do the Sharrows, you know, like they say in this report, it's $150 a Sharrow. By placing the Sharrows in those locations and putting Sharrows on the Capitola Avenue stretch from the freeway overpass down to Bay, where they are looking at a long-term bike lane, we're probably looking at an expenditure of $2,000 to $3,000. Sharrows have become the norm in these kinds of situations where you can't get your Class 2 lane in place. And they do work, and the standard has even pushed them out further into the street to make for a more effective signal to the automobile drivers that bikes are able to be out there and will be out there. So that's low-hanging fruit. I'd really like to see you guys, you know, push that forward with that small expenditure to get those Sharrows into place in those 3 locations. Anything we can do to complete that system around that school to really identify it as a complete route to school in terms of bicycle and pedestrian safety is really what we're trying to achieve. And again, that's low-hanging fruit. Thank you for your consideration.
I have a question, Daniel. You know the plastic cone-like devices that are in the street, you know, to protect bicyclists when they're turning corners or anything?
Yeah, those little plastic bollards.
Is there anything new on the horizon for that? They're, you know, they're not very attractive. There's one broken.
They're kind of dangerous too, I think.
Yeah, they're just not very attractive.
It's an extreme solution to a problem. Where they first started for us was putting them on Wharf Road, right, north of the Rispin Mansion, because to tell you the truth, I got taken out twice there, once, and then the other time bumped. So it was truly a condition where we needed to do something, and the best we could come up with at the time were those bollards. There are new types of elements that are being built into facilities where what they're in major cities where they're doing cycle tracks, which is a dedicated, kind of like what Mike was saying with having the 2 bike lanes together. So we can look around and see what's out there right now. The exciting thing is that bicycle facilities, this whole thing is, it's not just a bunch of geeks in spandex. It's really taking to the mainstream now, and especially in this county. And I think this city has great opportunity to finish out the bike lane system in the next couple years with just a couple of little pushes.
Exciting.
I have a question for Daniel. Daniel, I've been noticing in the city of Santa Cruz, they're really going full bore on the green bike
Yeah.
lanes.
Yeah.
And they stand out like nothing else. Is that
I
a
think
popular
it's
prospect?
it's very new, and you know the real movers in bike facilities, Portland, San Francisco, New York City, Chicago, those types of places have been in the forefront of the use of that. The purpose, as I understand it, is that's to highlight. You know, where you get a situation, a good example of where that would be helpful for us would be where the bicyclist has to cross at Gross Road, cross the on-ramp section at 41st to get to the bike lane on the overpass.
That's a tough bike lane, and it's always cheated by cars coming over the bridge.
Yeah.
They're always drifting over there.
And so my understanding is that green right now is to highlight that is a place you're going to find bicyclists where you might not think you would be finding them. So the other place you'll see Santa Cruz is using them, and SoCal Village has got them now, is when you approach the intersection and the dash line starts where the bike lane used to be a solid line, which is saying that you're going to have bikes, cars because of the right turn. They're starting to use them there to highlight like that as well. So I think you should use, my personal opinion, I'm not technical person on this, but I think you should use them judiciously right now. I wouldn't rush into those. Ultimately, what you would hope to have is what Europe has, where it's
A lot of
all
Europeans?
green.
Oh.
Your bike line's green all the way through the city, or in Berlin it's red all the way through the city. You know.
I saw those in Salinas. I was wondering what they were.
Yeah. They're very highly visible and slightly reflective at night, too.
Yeah, on that same subject, I'm not sure, you know, if we're allowed to do this, but I've seen the green, and when you mentioned it's just used to highlight, would it be to our advantage to make the sharrows green and highlight just those?
The standard, I believe, is for the white sharrow. And the good thing about that is there's a reflectivity element in those, isn't there? That reflects the vehicle light, headlights,
Okay.
which is an advantage.
Okay, great.
Thank
you, Daniel.
Good evening, Karen Hanna. I bet you thought I was here for the library or the city hall, didn't you?
I did.
Fooled ya.
Should have taken on.
Actually, and this is probably almost more for the chief. I had a really scary incident yesterday, driving towards the village on Bay Avenue, coming to the intersection at Monterey and Bay. 3 boys coming down the hill. No, on bicycles, ran that whole intersection. And the way the cars were there was a fairly large car, so anybody coming from the village down Monterey would not have seen the kids on the bikes at all. And I had not quite started, just was starting to enter the intersection, but saw them and was wondering where they were going. And they flew down at enough of a distance that since the first one made it successfully through the intersection, they all flew through it. And all 3 of us in the 3 cars at that intersection at the time just sat there and went, that was really scary, because they were moving fast and absolutely no regard for that stop sign. So whatever kind of bike rodeos, whatever kind of classes we have, it almost should be required if you're going to lock your bike in the city, in the school lot, you should have had to have attended one of those classes. Because as a cyclist, I spend half my time telling parents that they need to stop at stop signs on their bikes when they have their kids trailing along behind them, because how else will those kids ever know that they're supposed to stop? And it happens constantly. So, you know, I'm all for anything that makes it safer for cyclists of all ages, but that New Brighton School is so unique because no matter if you cycle, unless you live in Cliffwood Heights, you have a downhill when you leave that school. And who doesn't think about leaving school and riding away as fast as you possibly can? And it was a really seriously scary situation. I don't know if we ever put an officer out there to watch the traffic. It was about 2:15, and there weren't a lot of other kids walking around, so I'm not exactly sure when school gets out and if there was any coordination of that timing. But the whole thing about crossing guards, patrolling, enforcing, you know, that could right there have been a real tragedy. I mean, he could have T-boned me if I was 2 seconds faster, and he would have gotten the worst part of that deal. And it just, you know, the scenarios go on and on. So anything extra that can be done to teach bike safety and just, you know, work with the schools and the police department in that regard, I would really encourage. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Anyone else in the public would like to address us? Return it to council.
Okay. Since I'm trending here, I like the idea of the drop-off in the lower Pacific Cove, lower beach parking. It's a great idea. All it takes is a crossing guard. I would recommend that we have no exit on Bay, because that would create a greater hazard. They can just loop around and take a little bit more time. And speaking of taking a little more time, I know that people sometimes drive their kids to school because they're worried about the whole stranger danger idea. But if you really want to protect your child and keep them safe and increase safety overall, you need to exercise the same care after you drop off your child as you did ensuring your child arrives safely. In other words, they're all our children. Being careful, strapping them in, carefully driving them to the school, seeing them walk in, and then frankly driving like a bat out of hell away from the school so you can get to the rest of your life, endangering every other child, that is the danger to Santa Cruz children, not abduction. So take a deep breath, parents. Be careful. I think we accept the report, and let's do something about it. Let's get together with the district, if we can get a hold of them. And I'm sorry. I know where to get them. I know where to find them. I have Henry's email, so it'll be easy. And let's get a program going between us and the school and make it safer for the kids, because it's going to take months for parents to feel comfortable, for kids to feel comfortable. This is not an overnight thing where we can drop the gavel and make everyone safe, and tomorrow everyone's going to take their bike to school. It's not going to happen. This is a process. Let's just keep it going and do something about it. Thank you.
Second.
Oh, I'd love to have the mayor write the school district a letter and invite them to a meeting where we can talk about developing a joint plan for the safe route to schools.
Okay. I will do that.
And one, if I can grab another bite at the apple, we did discuss the Monterey-Kennedy bike lane when we discussed the safety of the new skate park. So let's not let that fall by the wayside. Let's keep the pressure on that. It's a very important path now, not only to safe route to school, but a safe route to a new recreational facility that we are building for the children.
Okay, good, Mike.
And something else we can do with the mid-year budget and with the budget in June is to kind of look at the budget with an eye towards pedestrian, bicycle, ADA safety. And not necessarily have a category of that, but I'll bring it up and we'll, just as a discussion, put some money towards that, put some focus towards that, because we kind of do, we kind of don't. It's kind of hit and miss. And, this is, it is a real opportunity to try to create safer places for people to walk and bike and put put some money towards it and help the school kids. Would be wonderful.
Be really good in the upcoming budget sessions that we actually allocate money for bicycle safety within the community as a line item. And certainly this report's the start of a hit list that we can use, Daniel, Steve, towards creating a list of improvements that we can do that are recommended, and certainly can go expand farther than that. But I think that we should definitely consider a line item in our budget as to bicycle safety issues as we do for automobiles with our community. I agree with Mike wholeheartedly. The answer to the school's problem and our traffic problem at 8 o'clock in the morning and 2:30 in the afternoon that back up all the way through Gales is to make it so the circulation does not require every single parent to drive right up to the front of that school. And you know the parents don't like it. I don't think the kids really care. In fact, they have to now, if you've dropped off at the Pacific Cove site, you have to walk 2 blocks. Yes, you'll need a crossing guard there. We'll need some type of manpower, but I think this discussion needs to start with the school district, and we have 2 representatives here that have monthly meetings. Is that correct, Ed, with the school?
Yeah, but
Okay.
they don't never, decisions don't come out of that go to the board, that come to us. That's why I want to meet together so we can talk together about it and try to come
Well,
up
I
with,
will
well, what'll
write-
work for them, what'll work for us. And
Okay.
mostly what'll work for them, for their kids.
I will write an invite letter to them.
Okay. Yes, sir. May I make a comment?
Go ahead.
I think it'd be good to get this to the traffic committee, see what they say. And the other thing is to reach out to the neighbors in that area, McCormick Triangle and along Monterey. Quite frankly, Monterey's very impacted. I think one of the letters to the board was that sometimes it takes half an hour to get out of the driveway, and I concur. I mean, if you're in the wrong spot, you do not get out of your driveway. And so I'd like to get some input from the neighbors, give them a chance to say something about this, the increased stop signs, things like that, maybe other alternatives. And I don't know what options Monterey Park offers, but it means that if someone drops their kid off there, they're not stopped in front of New Brighton, which would help lessen the traffic.
I think they would be stopping in front of your house, though, wouldn't they?
I don't mind. They do that already, actually. But I was talking about the Monterey parking lot, which is about, a block and a half away from New Brighton, so.
Okay, I think we have a motion here. Is there a motion on it?
I agree, a motion.
Michael, you
Yeah, motion to receive the report.
And I second.
That is the only action we've been asked to do.
Right.
Okay. And we expect, do we expect Steve to do a follow-up on this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we're expected to follow up as well. And even though it's not a meeting with the board, a meeting with the board will follow from not only your letter, Mr. Mayor, but also the people who sit with the school board members for lunch, promoting that. It's been a desire of this body for a long time. Hopefully it's infectious.
Can I ask a question? Jamie, have you reached out to Henry yet, the superintendent?
On this topic?
No, just to try to get the ball rolling again for the meetings that we've had between the two groups.
I have not. I'd be happy to do that. In the past, I think, the superintendent and I haven't played a role in setting those meetings up, but I'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, I think it would be good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
So carries. Thank you. Thanks, Mike, for your time. Appreciate it. Good report. Okay, we are moving back to item A on the agenda, which is the comprehensive annual financial report for fiscal year ending June 30th, and the housing successor of the City of Capitola amendment to the annual progress report.
Mr. Mayor, I thought we continued the Measure O update. Was that the presentation you were looking for? I thought the CAFR was on consent.
Measure O.
Well, that was the
That was just
consent.
Yes. This is, we're on Measure O.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey.
Okay.
Okay.
10A.
Okay, I'm sorry. This is item A. Receive an update on the 5-year Measure O plan.
We would be happy to present the CAFR if you would
thank
so
you.
desire, but I figure at this hour.
No, that would be just a real.
Tell Tori not that
suspected
we
as
don't
much.
really love it and we'll take it home and read it cover to cover.
I was in bed and I only needed 5 minutes of sleep.
Okay. So this item is on your agenda this evening at the request of the treasurer, who suggested that staff could provide a short update to the council regarding the Measure O funding that's come in, where it's gone, and the proposed plan over the next couple of years of how to use Measure O funding. You'll recall Measure O brings in about $1 million a year. So far to date, the funding has been allocated just to the expressed commitments that were made by the council for Measure O funds, augmenting the public works crew, bringing us back to full strength with our crews, increasing some of the PD staffing to help with village enforcement, CIP and street maintenance, and then the annual reserves. Putting money into the reserves for the thank you. Fully fund the reserves. Thank you. That's what I'm looking for. You can see in this current fiscal year, we anticipate the reserves will reach a level of $2.8 million. In next fiscal year, we're about $300,000 short from being fully funded. To date, we've used $447,000 of Measure O funding to get us into the reserves, and in addition, extra general fund contributions as well. These are the projects that have been funded. Steve is going to come on up here and if you have any questions about the projects, but these are the projects so far funded through the Measure O allocation, which is more than $1 million, nearly 1.1. We've completed the slurry seal in Cliffwood Heights and Riverview Terrace. We have the Clares Wharf traffic calming project in progress, Bay Avenue streetscape, Park Avenue sidewalk, and then earlier, still being developed, the Park Avenue bike lanes, Rosedale, Monterey and Park, Railroad Station, Park and Pathway.
So I'll just add to that the final 3 projects there, we're getting eminently close to selecting the consultants to begin design work on those, so those should get moving pretty quickly here. You all know the story on Clares. We're waiting for the sanitation district to complete that. And the Bay Street and Bay Street streetscape, we're trying to lump that together with another project so it makes more economic sense to put it out to bid. And the Park Avenue sidewalk, we should have under construction this summer. So.
Where's our Stockton crosswalk rehab on this?
That's out to bid right now.
Good.
So it's not on there. I don't think it's Measure O funded.
Oh.
As they split it out, these are only Measure O projects.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Happy to hear it's out to bid.
Yeah. So with that, staff is available for questions.
Just a quick, on Mike's note, and I brought this up earlier, just for clarification, because I'm trying not to confuse the public. They see that as Measure O, and if you could just elaborate on the other projects that it did, like with the Stockton and 38th Avenue, major projects that are in the works, but not necessarily Measure O.
Boy, you're really test my here.
Major.
So we have
There's
major
a lot of them,
projects,
yeah.
Paving the 38th. We have the roundabout design. It's only for a design and looking at it right now at Bay and Capitola Avenue. And then we have some minor pedestrian improvements on Hill Street that are funded and a sidewalk improvement. I think that's going to include a sidewalk improvement project on Cap Ave. I'm sure there's one I'm forgetting right now, but I'm sorry. I didn't come prepared
I just
for
wanted to make sure that it was clear to the public, because
yeah,
it's confusing.
just to clarify, so we have multiple funding sources that go into our capital improvement program. Measure O is one of the sources. It's our major funding source right now, but it is only one. So the projects listed here were just the projects that have received Measure O funding. We do have others.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that,
Sure.
Steve.
I have a question about crosswalk on Park for the bus.
Yes, that's part of the Park Avenue sidewalk project. Yes.
Okay. So I think the last time we talked, there was 1 or 2 places you were thinking of?
Yeah, we're looking at a crosswalk at the end of Washburn.
Okay.
So that,
and then further out?
And then the other one would be at Wesley.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. Any more questions of staff?
The motion to accept the report.
I just have a question of, I think there's public comment, but just a clarification. So after the next year's budget, just for Measure O, of that 1.1 million, 1 million of it will be put into the streets of Capitola.
Yeah, in next year's budget, the financing plan we have proposed at this point would include $655,000 of Measure O funding into the CIP, and then $273 into the reserves, which gets us fully funded. The following year, 16-17, we're looking at $965.
That's
Now,
almost all of Measure O funds going into CIP projects.
yes,
I just wanted to underscore that.
yes.
Thank you.
We'll take public comment on this. Sterling?
No, you're the only one.
Sterling. Ooh.
Sterling. So Nathan Cross again, member of the Financial Advisory Committee, and I just want to share with you the perspective of why we also ask as a Financial Advisory Commission to have this reviewed with the public. And it came out of some comments that were generated from the election that took place recently, and that there were some allegations that Measure O funds weren't being spent in a way that they were originally designated and approved for. And it makes me feel really good to know that our City Council and our City Manager are ensuring that these funds are being used in the way that they were designated. And it bothers me that people from the from the community can make allegations without investigating really in depth how things are being spent and make assertions about certain things. And this provides the information that they should have garnered and requested before those kinds of comments were made. So thank you, City Council, for being very adamant about supporting the way that these monies are being spent and supporting the projects, and also from the Financial Advisory Commission's perspective, thank you very much for following some of the things that we've brought forth to you, and especially for bringing this to the public. The only thing that I will say that I'm a little disappointed in is this didn't hold the place it did on the agenda when the room was much fuller than it is right now. So I would request in some way City Council continue to reach out to the community and inform them about how this money is being spent, and then the rules and regulations to what people voted for are in fact being followed. Because if you truly, as members of our community, want to reach out to them and get them the information, as you've mentioned tonight, regarding the whole issue about the parking structure, City Hall, the hotel, and so forth, this is an important part to get out to them so that they know how their money is being spent and that there's integrity in the way that people are looking at it and making sure that it is spent.
Thank you, Nathan.
Quick question of staff. Mr. City Manager, hopefully the Measure O, seeing these very positive Measure O funds with our CIP projects, we didn't just use Measure O funds to reduce the amount that we're putting into CIP from the regular general fund budget so we can use it elsewhere, did we? So this is not the only money we're spending on CIP. This is above and beyond what we normally budget.
Yes, that's correct. This is above and beyond what we normally budget. Now, I don't have off the top of my head that the general fund, the additional allocation that we've made to CIP each year, but there has been an additional allocation as well as an additional allocation into the reserves, as you can see on this chart. From the general fund. I think one point, though, in hearing the conversation that I do think is worth everybody keeping in the back of their mind is that this Measure O funding plan dealt with the overlap between Measure O and Measure D, right? And that's so this 16-17 represents the commitment for those Measure O funds. The picture in 17-18 is not as rosy for the city. We will not have $1 million to put into the CIP. And so I think everybody just needs to keep that in the back of their mind when we're thinking about the future is that we have a good plan in place here where we have these two taxes overlapping. It's going to get harder in 17-18. So maybe as we start thinking in the future about presenting this, we need to show further out because the trajectory here looks so good, and understand that it gets a lot tougher in 17-18 down the road.
But my comment is that's, Nathan's point is one of the reasons why I want to do a newsletter more often, to get more information out to people. There's so many things that are going on, or we put an article in there and people forget, and then they call you back. Can I recycle batteries? Does the city take batteries? You cannot run that article too often. But I really, in the budget year this year, I hope we can allocate a little more money. It doesn't cost that much to do a newsletter. We can get stuff like this out, articles about what we're doing, and just promote what the good things about the city that we're doing. And I think we need to do more of that, and that's a great vehicle for it, and that doesn't cost that much.
Good idea, Stephanie. Has everyone in the public addressed this issue and would like to? Is there anyone else out there? Okay, being none.
Sorry.
Now a motion to adopt, accept the report?
We'll just accept the report.
Just accept the report.
Yeah, accept it. Motion to accept?
Motion to accept. Second.
Okay, got a motion to second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are ready to adjourn to the next special meeting of the City Council on Thursday, January 29th at 6 o'clock. It's 6.
Dennis?
Why is it 6?
Dennis, there's a hand up.
Oh, sorry, Stephanie.
That's
Go
okay.
ahead.
Just one quick oral communication. I attended the neighborhood meeting of the Brookville Terrace Mobile Home Park last week with the sanitation district and the fire department and the consultants and Caltrans, I think, was there. And anyway, there were a number of people there. And they're on board with it. They're ready to go.
That's for the sewer replacement line?
It's a sewer replacement line that isn't even their line. It just goes under their park. It is going to connect with their line down towards the end. And so they're putting up with a lot for us. And there are going to be some street closures. And we might, the sanitation is hopefully going to throw in the cost of a couple of golf carts to get people around, because everybody's not going to be able to park their car out on the street and walk way down there. So that's the only thing we've identified so far, other than we're going to need to open up the emergency gate up above and to get people in and out that way at some points, because at some points in this project, the streets are going to be closed, period. You're not going to be able to walk in or out or get in and out.
Isn't that their gate, though?
Pardon?
Isn't that their gate?
Yeah, but the man on the other side is, we're going to have to talk to him about it, because he's going to yell about that. The man that illegally put up the red curb and the basketball hoop.
Right.
So just a heads up about that. I said, you know, we'll deal with that, because those people are going to need that other access, absolutely. And it's not going to, it's, you know, not that much traffic or anything that it's going to be, but just a heads up. We'll hear about that. But it was a really great meeting. I think it's going to move forward. You know, well, everybody's together, working together, and informed about things, talking to each other, and you know, it was really complicated, but it went very well.
Thank you, Stephanie.
And I do want to, as you noted, next week we do have a special meeting, 6 p.m., which will be the council, sort of new council orientation workshop. We'll get a guest speaker in, and we'll be able to talk about some of the procedural items, things along those lines. So if you have any particular burning item that you'd like to talk about as a council, let me know. This isn't policy, but it's more procedural type issues.
6 to 8, or what are you thinking? 6 to 9?
Yeah, I think we'll be done by 8.
Okay. Thank you. Good night, Capitola. Speed limit in Capitola is 25 miles an hour. If you drive 25 miles an hour, everybody behind you has to drive 25 miles an hour.
Nice meeting.
Unless you're at Park Avenue where it's 35.
We're not
Why
even
don't we
mentioning
gotta
that.
change that?
We're not even mentioning it.